Chapter 163. Everything was calm. After a long time, Emotienga finally heaved a sigh of relief. Although it was someone else's life or death, it was still tragic for her to see it happen right in front of her. And such a tragic life and death was only because they had deep feelings that cultivators shouldn't have. Realizing that her emotions were fluctuating, she immediately gathered her spirit and qi. Taishang Wangqing did not mean that he was emotionless. Wangqing meant how could he not be moved by emotions? If one had forgotten, the speaker would care about it, and become complacent and forget to say a word. Emotions were innocent, and emotions were innocent. The sinner was Yao Zixio. There were too many things mixed in his emotions. There was ambition, there was grief, there was hatred. It was these things that prevented him from seeing through them. He was unable to enjoy the joy of love, and was constantly tormented by it. Sinners are not sentimental, they are just humans. At that moment they heard Taoist Fangjing shouting, "Fellow Taoist, ye look." When Emotienga looked towards Yao Zixio and Shang Ruan, she couldn't help but widen her eyes. A misty white light appeared on the bodies of the two people. The light grew brighter and brighter, more and more glaring. All of a sudden, it exploded, and the spiritual energy surged out, causing their auras to churn. They tried to circulate their qi to resist, but they couldn't. The light instantly engulfed them. After an unknown amount of time, Emotienga finally felt the spiritual aura slowly subsiding. She opened her eyes, and was stunned by the scene in front of her. In front of them was clearly the Five Elements platform that they were previously on. Did that mean that the illusory array was broken? She was delighted, but when she turned around she was startled. There were indeed several other people either lying or sitting on the other four stone platforms. But aside from Taoist Fangjing, none of them were awake. Taoist Fangjing also noticed her. He looked at her and said, "Fellow Taoist Yi." Both of them were bewildered. What was going on? Suddenly, with a shake of his feet, the five elements platforms began to move towards the center. After a while, with a rumbling sound, the five elements platforms combined into one. A ray of light flashed, and turned into a big stone platform. Gold, green, blue, red, and yellow. The 5 colors each occupied a circle. It was just like the 5 elements platform in the illusion array, but this stone platform was ridiculously big. What's going on? Taoist Fangjing looked at her. Emotienga didn't answer. Instead, she lowered her head to examine the other people on the ground. Aside from her and Taoist Fangjing, the other 7 people were all on the stone platforms. Even Yin Ruoshu, whose corpse she put into her Qingkuan bag inside the illusory formation, was no exception. These people didn't seem to have any external injuries, but their faces were pale, and they weren't breathing. Emotienga stretched out her hand to feel Yin Ruoshu and the others' pulses. Their pulses had already stopped, so she couldn't pour her spiritual aura into their bodies. She sighed. He's dead. Taoist Fangjing examined Lu Xiangxin, and Wang Xiangji then shook his head. They can't be saved. The two of them looked at each other in confusion. Since Yin Ruoshu's corpse was here, it meant that the illusion formation was a complete fake. Everything they saw and heard in the illusion array was fake. The real them had probably been on the stone platform all this time, not moving at all. But these people still died. Lu Xiangxin and Wang Xiangji were killed by Yao Zixio, who was in the core formation realm. Yin Ruoshu was bewitched by the illusions inside the illusory formation, and died after her blood essence was exhausted. Emotienga didn't know what the two women Yun and Lu went through, but their willpower wasn't strong, and they didn't get along well with each other. So it wasn't impossible for them to be bewitched together in the end. Yao Zixio was bewitched by his own inner demon, and bewitched by the illusions, so Shang Ruan was killed by Yao Zixio. Emotienga was terrified when she thought about this. This formation was really terrifying. Everything was fake, but the deaths and injuries were real. Fellow Taoist Yi, Taoist Fangjing suddenly called out. He was examining Yao Zixio's corpse just now, but now, he was pointing at Shang Ruan. What's wrong? She seems to be alive, Taoist Fangjing said while looking at Shang Ruan. Emotienga was stunned. She stepped forward and touched Shang Ruan's chest. Sure enough, there was still some heat. She hastily took out several green amplifying pills, fed them to Shang Ruan, and poured her spiritual aura into her body. After a long time, Shang Ruan finally groaned and woke up. Big Sister Shang. Emotinga called softly. Shang Ruan slowly opened her eyes. When she saw Emotinga, she was stunned for a moment. Little Sister Yi. Don't talk for now. Your injuries are very serious. You should adjust your breathing and heal your injuries first. Shang Ruan didn't do as Emotinga said. Instead, she thought for a moment, as if she recalled what she experienced in the illusory formation. Her complexion suddenly paled, and she turned around. When she saw Yao Zixio lying next to her with his eyes closed, she immediately threw herself at him. Big Brother Xiao! Big Brother Xiao! Yao Zixio didn't respond. Taoist Fangjing examined him just now. Yao Zixio really died in the same way Yin Ruoshu died in the illusory formation. He lost all his blood essence. Presumably, it was because he was too obsessed with his own illusions that his blood essence was sucked dry. But Emotinga couldn't figure out why Shang Ruan was still alive. Lu Xiangxin and Wang Xiangji were both beaten to death by Yao Zixio, but they died for real. It didn't make sense for Shang Ruan to be alive. Big Brother Xiao. After confirming Yao Zixio was dead, Shang Ruan was in a daze and didn't move for a long time. Emotinga didn't know what Shang Ruan was thinking, but she knew Shang Ruan's injuries were too serious. If she didn't heal her injuries soon, she would still die. Big Sister Shang. Emotinga called softly, but Shang Ruan still didn't respond. Upon seeing Shang Ruan's current state, Emotinga heaved a sigh. She gently raised her hand and shot a spiritual aura at Shang Ruan. Shang Ruan instantly fainted. Taoist Fangjing was astonished. Emotinga only helped Shang Ruan lie down on the side, then looked up and said, Fellow Taoist Fangjing, there's only the two of us now. Fellow Taoist, what do you think we should do next? Taoist Fangjing hesitated for a moment before his gaze swept over the corpses. Since these fellow Taoists are dead, let's deal with their remains first. Emotinga understood what he meant by deal with their remains. Among cultivators, if one of their companions died, the remaining people would divide the person's belongings among themselves. Emotinga wasn't disgusted by this, but she also wasn't too enthusiastic about it because she didn't lack medicinal pills or spirit stones. Therefore, she just nodded absent-mindedly. If Emotinga was with other people, Taoist Fangjing probably wouldn't have said anything and would have taken those people's chinquan bags, as if it was a matter of course. However, Taoist Fangjing saw that Emotinga obviously carried the habits of elite disciples of cultivation groups, and wasn't like other individual cultivators, who only cared about profit. Taoist Fangjing was also afraid of her strength, so he restrained himself a bit. In fact, this was also because Taoist Fangjing was too cautious. Emotinga was also an individual cultivator, and wasn't a young miss from a cultivation group, so she was naturally used to this, and basically didn't have any objections. Taoist Fangjing took those 6 people's chinquan bags one by one. Just as he was about to burn the corpses, he suddenly heard Emotinga shout and stopped. Emotinga said, I'll take Yao Zixio's things. Don't burn his corpse for now. Taoist Fangjing nodded, then put Yao Zixio's corpse on the side. He then handed Yao Zixio's chinquan bag to her and said, Fellow Taoist Yi, how should we divide this? Half each. Emotinga answered faintly as she put Yao Zixio's chinquan bag into Shang Ruan's arms. Taoist Fangjing heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing her answer. If Emotinga said she didn't want it, he would have been worried, because that would have meant she was either too naive, or her temperament wasn't compatible. Furthermore, they were on the 5 Elements platform now, and hadn't reached the end of their journey yet. No matter which one it was, there might be problems if they cooperated later. The two of them finished dividing the things, and burned the corpses. Taoist Fangjing hesitated for a moment, then asked, Fellow Taoist Yi, should we take Madame Yao with us? Emotinga paused for a moment. If she was alone, she wouldn't mind taking her along. She wasn't a good person who showed excessive kindness, but she found Shang Ruan very pleasing to the eye. Nevertheless, there were only 2 of them now. She could also see that Taoist Fangjing didn't want to take Shang Ruan with him. A seriously injured cultivator who couldn't fight would only drag them down. Emotinga thought for a while, then shook her head. Let's think about how to get out of here first. The illusory formation had been broken, so their thoughts were naturally useless here. However, they didn't know what would happen if they left this stone platform. Oh, fellow Taoist, ye look. Taoist Fangjing shouted as he pointed towards the depths of the hall. Emotianga followed his finger and looked. She was instantly delighted. This place looked like a hall, but the ground was actually empty. There was only this large floating stone platform, and underneath it was a boundless void. Emotianga didn't know what it was. The only door in this hall was the one they came in from. Before the illusory formation was activated, it seemed like they could manipulate the stone platforms with their thoughts. But now that the 5 stone platforms had merged into one, and the illusory formation had been broken, their thoughts were no longer useful. But now, in the depths of the hall, where the stone wall used to be, a door had appeared. Apparently, the illusory formation had been broken, and the entrance leading to the depths of the Immortal's Cave had also been opened. Emotianga quickly calmed down after feeling delighted. Fellow Taoist Fangjing, this illusory formation alone is already so brilliant. If we want to continue, we have to be even more careful. An excited expression appeared on Taoist Fangjing's face as he nodded repeatedly. For him, there was nothing more important than fated chances. Although they didn't obtain any benefits from the illusory formation trial, the illusory formation was so powerful. So if they could find something, it definitely wouldn't be simple. Since they came this far, there was no reason to turn back. Although Emotianga didn't want treasures as urgently as Taoist Fangjing, she also had no reason to retreat. It has to be said that even if Qin Shoujing had a nascent soul cultivator as an ancestor, he still had to walk his own path of cultivation. He couldn't rely on his elders for everything. If he didn't experience it himself, he would never grow under the wings of his elders. But how are we going to get there? Under the stone platform was an endless void, but they didn't know what it was. If this was a killing formation, and they triggered something, Taoist Fangjing also frowned. Among the 9 people who came here, 6 died, and 1 was seriously injured. Now only the 2 of them were still in good condition. He didn't have much time left in his lifespan. He urgently needed fated chances, but he also cherished his life even more. After thinking for a while, Taoist Fangjing heaved a sigh. He opened the spiritual beast pouch on his waist, and released a spiritual beast. It was a first-rank bird. Taoist Fangjing stroked the bird's head, then released it, letting the bird fly into the depths of the hall according to his instructions. The bird screeched, then flapped its wings, and flew in the direction he pointed. The 2 of them watched on with trepidation, but they saw the bird successfully reaching the other end of the hall, and going through the door. After a while, the bird went through the door again and flew back. Taoist Fangjing was delighted. It's very safe. Fellow Taoist, let's go. Right after he said that, he took the lead and flew away. Emotianga looked at Shang Ruan, who was lying unconscious on the ground. She sighed, then took out a medicine bottle and put it in her pocket. She also summoned the white silk handkerchief and followed after them. Chapter 164. Emotianga stepped onto the white silk handkerchief and entered the door inside the main hall. She looked around and saw that it was still a narrow stone passage, just like when they came in. However, the walls here were inlaid with moonstones, so they didn't need to light a fire like when they came in. Moonstones rarely lasted for several thousand years. An immortal's cave from several thousand years ago should be as dark as the passage they first came in. So how could there still be moonstones here? Taoist Fangjing also thought so. The 2 of them stood in front of the wall and pried off a moonstone each. This, after studying it for a while, Taoist Fangjing said, seems to be mother moonstones. Emotianga was confused. Taoist Fangjing looked carefully for a while, then nodded. Yes, there's a moonstone mine here. These are all mother moonstones, so they can last for so long. In terms of experience, Taoist Fangjing had mingled in both the cultivation world and the secular world for several hundred years, so he naturally had a lot of experience. Upon hearing what he said, Emotianga nodded, then threw the mother of moonstone into her chinkuan bag, then continued to walk forward. Although moonstone mines were rare, they had no other use in the cultivation world except for illumination, so they weren't precious. The two of them cautiously walked on the stone slabs. Ever since they entered Kunwu, they'd encountered countless dangerous situations, so Emotienga had always been cautious. In her opinion, Daoist Fangjing's behavior was very similar to second uncle's. Her way of doing things was developed when she was with second uncle, so she and Daoist Fangjing were very compatible. This time, Daoist Fangjing let the first-rank bird explore the way in front of them. The two of them walked without any mishaps. There were several traps in the passage, but the spiritual aura had dissipated due to the passage's long history. With the bird leading the way, they managed to avoid them one by one. However, they found several corpses on the ground. These corpses were intertwined with each other, and had all turned into skeletons. Their clothes had long been rotten, leaving only a few damaged magic tools and intact Qiankuan bags. Among the corpses, there were some treasures, materials, or magic weapons. Daoist Fangjing immediately looked happy and crouched down to pick them up. Emotienga shouted, "Fellow Daoist Fangjing, wait!" Daoist Fangjing looked up at her with vigilance in his eyes. At his age, he'd gone through many adventures and seen his companions fighting over things. Now that he heard Emotienga shouting at him to stop, he immediately became vigilant. Based on his expression, how could Emotienga not guess what he meant? Nevertheless, she only said faintly, "There are so many skeletons here, and they weren't a group of people. However, all of them died here, so maybe there's some mystery behind it." Upon hearing what she said, Daoist Fangjing finally relaxed and once again looked carefully. Sure enough, there were more than 20 corpses on this passage, which was only about 100 feet long. They were almost densely packed together, and there was no place for them to step on. Looking at their postures, they were all twisted together in groups of 2 or 3, as if they were going to perish together. Daoist Fangjing was so terrified that he broke out in a cold sweat. Judging from their postures, these people had fought each other to death. Moreover, their corpses were of different degrees of age. The bones of the newer corpses were snow white while the bones of the older corpses were black. A cultivator's body didn't have any impurities, so it wouldn't rot. However, it would turn into spiritual aura and disperse, but the bones left behind could be preserved for a long time. Based on the color of the bones, one could tell how long they'd been dead. The skeletons in front of them were of different bone types. Among them, the blackest ones had almost turned into a pile of black ash, which meant they'd been dead for at least several thousand years. However, there were also some snow-white ones among them, which meant they'd been dead for no more than 1,000 years. They all knew how powerful the illusory formation outside was. Out of 9 people, only the 2 of them made it here in one piece. Besides, the spiritual aura fluctuation outside the valley couldn't have existed all the time. Otherwise, they wouldn't have never heard of it. In other words, not many people came here in the past several thousand years. The magic weapons, magic tools, and rare materials scattered all over the ground also proved that no one left safely. That being the case, how could the treasures in front of them be taken at will? Daoist Fangjing couldn't help but feel a bit ashamed when he realized this. In the beginning, he didn't take Emotienga seriously. He only thought she was a disciple who'd just left the cultivation group. Although her cultivation level was high, her ability was probably very ordinary, just like Giga School's Lu and Wang. However, he never thought she'd wake him up with a single sentence in the illusory formation. Now that she was here, she was much calmer than him. After experiencing these 2 things, he no longer dared to look down on Emotienga. "Fellow Taoist Yi, in your opinion there's something wrong with this path," Emotienga said slowly. "It seems to be able to confuse people's minds." Even inside the illusory formation, her spirit-concealing pendant didn't feel anything strange, because the illusory formation didn't erode people's minds. Instead, it tested people's temperament and willpower. However, as soon as she approached this path, her spirit-concealing pendant instantly turned ice-cold, as if it was warning her. The cultivators who could reach this place must have passed the illusory formation on the 5 elements platforms, so their temperaments should be extremely stable. Aside from willpower problems, what other reason could make them lose their rationality and commit suicide together? These people understood the principle of being alive, to enjoy natural treasures. How did fellow Taoist you know? Emotianga said faintly. I have a magic tool that can sense things that confuse people. After giving a simple explanation, she didn't say anything else. She had a unique treasure on her, so she didn't need to explain it too clearly. Taoist Fangjing was also a smart person, so he didn't ask any more questions. The two of them carefully searched for any strange objects in their surroundings. This stone path wasn't different from the previous one. It was a simple stone path carved out of the mountain. The only difference was that the ground was a bit flat, and the mountain wall was inlaid with moonstones. Oh! As soon as she approached the stone wall, the spirit-concealing pendant's ice-cold feeling became even stronger. Could it be that there was something wrong with the stone wall? Emotianga pondered for a moment, then took out her flying sword to pry out another moonstone from the stone path. The lustrous white light wasn't any different from the moonstones from before, but this faint spiritual aura gave her a familiar feeling. Fellow Taoist Yi, Taoist Fangjing suddenly shouted, "This isn't a moonstone." As he said that, he immediately took out heart-calming talismans, stuck one on himself, then gave another to Emotianga. Emotianga didn't feel anything out of the ordinary. In the illusory formation, it was her own emotions that were fluctuating, so the spirit-concealing pendant was useless. However, in this place, it was an external factor that had no effect on her due to the spirit-concealing pendant. Nevertheless, after some thought, she still took the heart-calming talisman and stuck it on herself. She then held the moonstone and asked, "Fellow Taoist said this isn't a moonstone? Then what is it?" "This is a bewitching moonstone." Taoist Fangjing wasn't as relaxed as Emotianga. He forced himself to calm down, then answered, "A kind of bewitching moonstone is often found in moonstone mines. This kind of thing can cause people to hallucinate, so it's a good material for making illusory formations. However, although moonlight stone mines are not rare, bewitching moonlight stones are very rare, and not many people know about them. I only saw a small piece in a secret shop a few decades ago, and that small piece was auctioned for over 1,000 spirit stones." At this point, Taoist Fangjing's gaze was filled with excitement. I never expected the master of this immortal's cave could actually find so many bewitching moonstones. If I can take all of them. As she quietly sensed the spiritual aura emitted by this bewitching moonstone, a thought flashed through Emotianga's mind. She suddenly thought of something. She reached into her Qingquan bag and rummaged through it. She took out several jade fragments and compared them with this bewitching moonstone. Sure enough, they were made of the same material. It was just that these fragments had exhausted their spiritual aura and were already broken. More than 10 years ago, when she just built her foundation, she and Wei Jiasi once encountered the bewitching twin monsters during the demonic beast riot. The bewitching twin monster was born with wisdom. It designed an illusory formation that almost made the two of them kill each other. In the end, she obtained this jade fragment. Now it seemed this jade fragment was indeed a bewitching moonstone. Upon realizing this, Emotianga couldn't help but feel apprehensive as she looked at the wall full of bewitching moonstones. Back then, a formation laid with only a piece of stone was able to trap her and Wei Jiasi, two foundation-building cultivators. There were so many bewitching moonstones here. If they were all used to lay a formation, wouldn't its power be so great that even nascent soul cultivators would find it difficult to escape? Just like Taoist Fangjing, Emotianga's eyes also lit up. The two of them didn't say anything. Each of them picked up their flying swords, then cautiously pried the bewitching moonstones on the wall. However, if this thing could be broken so easily, so many cultivators wouldn't have died here. After approaching the bewitching moonstones for a long time, Emotianga realized she wasn't very clear-headed. Fortunately, she had the spirit-concealing pendant, so she immediately distanced herself from them. Just as she was about to warn Taoist Fangjing, she raised her head and saw a sword flash in front of her. Taoist Fangjing's eyes shone with an ominous glint as he thrust the small flying sword he used to pry the bewitching moonstones at her. Emotianga raised her hand, creating a spiritual aura wall to block Taoist Fangjing's thrust. Soon after, she retreated and lifted her hand to release the shuttle of flying Apsara. Without saying a word, Taoist Fangjing put away the small flying sword and took out his horsetail whisk. With a flick of his horsetail whisk, thousands upon thousands of needle-like strands of horsetail whisk shot towards her. Although the quality of this horsetail whisk magic tool wasn't as good as her shuttle of flying Apsara, Emotienga didn't dare to look down on it. Daoist Fangjing's spiritual aura was rich, so although his magic tool wasn't very good, its power was great. She immediately flung her sleeve, and threw the white silk handkerchief, which turned into a wall and blocked his attack. Taking advantage of this gap, Emotienga shouted, "Fellow Daoist Fangjing, wake up!" Daoist Fangjing didn't react at all. He was still rushing towards her with his head covered. Emotienga had no choice but to use the shuttle of flying Apsara to tie him down while retreating. Although Daoist Fangjing wasn't weak, he couldn't be considered much compared to Xianqing School's elite disciples. It was just that Emotienga didn't want to hurt him. At this point, she only had Daoist Fangjing as her companion, and the master of this place was very good at hallucinatory techniques. Who knew what she would encounter later? Having someone to keep her company and remind her from time to time was much better than being alone. However, Daoist Fangjing, who was in front of her, showed no signs of waking up. He was still attacking her mercilessly. Emotienga felt helpless. She kept parrying his attacks while slowly retreating. After all, this place was too close to the bewitching moonstone. If she was a bit further away, the effect would probably be a bit weaker. Daoist Fangjing's gaze finally became sober after he retreated about 100 feet. He stopped attacking and said with astonishment, "Fellow Daoist, ye this?" Emotienga heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing that he had regained his consciousness. It's good that fellow Daoist has regained his consciousness. This bewitching moonstone is really powerful. Chapter 165. Although Daoist Fangjing regained his consciousness, the problem still wasn't solved. They were at the entrance of this stone path, but Daoist Fangjing was still affected even with heart-calming talismans. If they went deeper, Emotienga wasn't sure she could pass. Thus they reached an impasse. The two of them discussed several methods, but they still couldn't find a solution. There were so many bewitching moonstones that they couldn't pass with their current strength. What should we do? Daoist Fangjing turned around and asked. After being reminded by Emotienga again and again, he was now used to asking this junior for advice. Emotienga couldn't think of a solution, but she was unwilling to turn back. In the previous trial, 6 out of 9 people died. 1 was half dead, and only 2 were in good condition. How could she be willing to turn back after paying such a price? But she wasn't strong enough. Perhaps the master of this place laid this path to stop cultivators below the core formation realm. If they forced their way through, wouldn't they lose their lives? Emotienga pondered for a while, then clenched her teeth. We can't take this path anymore. Fellow Daoist Fangjing, let's find another way. Daoist Fangjing was obviously unwilling. With a reluctant expression on his face, he looked at the bewitching moonstone's passage several times. Emotienga said, "With our current strength we can't pass this path. I don't want to lose my life here." Daoist Fangjing also hesitated upon hearing that. He naturally understood that Emotienga was different from him. Based on the numerous treasures she had, she should be a disciple of a big cultivation group. She had such a high cultivation level at such a young age, so it wasn't worth the risk. If his companions were the same as him, they might grit their teeth and go through it together, just like the cultivators who died here. However, he couldn't summon the courage to do so without a companion. This kind of hallucinatory thing affected people's minds. It didn't mean they wouldn't kill each other if they didn't have a companion. If they lost their minds, they'd go crazy. At that time, even if there was no companion, they'd still hurt themselves. Alright, since fellow Daoist you said so. Daoist Fangjing finally made up his mind. Although he didn't have much time left in his lifespan, he wasn't completely hopeless. He was unwilling to die here. He thought for a while, then said, "But should we look for another place?" Not to mention Daoist Fangjing, even Emotienga felt unwilling. He had nearly lost his life when he descended the valley. In the illusory formation, he had seen the others die or get heavily injured. In the end, he was unable to take another step forward. How could he be willing to give up? Alright. However, fellow Daoist Fangjing, if we can't find it, It's best we leave as soon as possible. Of course, Taoist Fangjing hastily answered. This place was filled with danger. Of course, he didn't want to stay any longer. She watched as Taoist Fangjing knocked on the short passage and carefully examined it, but she just stood there and didn't move. She wondered what was wrong with the whole thing. First of all, although the spiritual qi coming from the valley was pure, it wasn't vast. If a cultivator above the core formation stage were to pass by, they wouldn't care at all. As for when they went down the valley, with their cultivation levels, they could only barely pass through, which was why aura refining cultivators were blocked outside the valley. However, if they were core formation cultivators, it would be very easy for them. Then there was the illusory formation. If a core formation cultivator went through the trial of the inner demon, even if they couldn't break the illusory formation, they would still be scared but not in danger. They definitely wouldn't end up with such a tragic outcome like the 6 dead and 1 injured core formation cultivator. Based on these previous characteristics, they came to a conclusion. Although they didn't know who left this valley behind, it was targeted at foundation-building cultivators. However, foundation-building cultivators simply didn't dare to step on this path. No matter how they thought about it, it didn't seem right. In that case, either this path was fake, and there was another path leading to the next step, or the owner of this place was too vile and deliberately set up this trap. Once she thought up to this point, Emotienga once again wondered what kind of existence this valley was in the end. Judging from the valley's illusory formation and the layout of this bewitching moonstone passage, the owner of this place obviously had a powerful cultivation level. She guessed he must have been in the nascent soul realm or above. An immortal's cave left behind by a nascent soul cultivator should have been of interest to other nascent soul cultivators. In that case, it seemed like the owner deliberately wanted to attract foundation-building cultivators. Once she thought up to this point, Emotienga was terrified. Soon after, she recalled that this immortal's cave had obviously been empty for a long time, so there shouldn't be any sinister purpose. But how could she explain the owner's actions? What about the cultivators who died under the bewitching moonstone, deliberately attracting foundation-building cultivators and letting them die here? What benefit did the owner of this immortal's cave get? Or was it really just a vile interest? A vile interest that could cost human lives. Wasn't it too cruel? Fellow Taoist Yi. Taoist Fangjing suddenly called out in surprise. Emotienga turned around and saw Taoist Fangjing pointing at a stone wall. Look, there's a door here. Emotienga walked closer to take a closer look. Sure enough, there was a fine crack on the stone wall that looked like a door. Let me try. As Taoist Fangjing said that, he retreated a little, then swung his horsetail whisk. The whisk's wisps surged with spiritual aura as he struck the door with all his might. A loud noise came from the stone door, but it was easily pushed open. Emotienga was stunned. This seemed a bit too easy. The two of them cautiously looked inside. It seemed to be a stone room. It was smaller than the main hall, but it was a bit bigger than ordinary stone rooms in immortals' caves. It looked like a small hall. It was empty inside, with only a few stone sculptures and a few large round stones hanging from the ceiling, illuminating the entire room. Sunstone. Taoist Fangjing cried out in surprise. Sunstone. Emotienga was puzzled. Correct. Taoist Fangjing smiled. Fellow Taoist Yi, with these sunstones, even if we return now, this trip won't be in vain. Oh, Taoist Fangjing explained. For us cultivators, moonstones are only used for illumination, just like the lamps in the mortal world. However, these sunstones can produce the effect of sunlight, and they can even be used to produce sun-real fire. The effect of sunlight, sun-real fire. Emotienga only took a moment to understand how precious this thing was. There was no need to mention sun-real fire. It was one of the 3 best real fires for concocting medicinal pills and refining tools. In the cultivation world, the furnace fire used for concocting medicinal pills and refining tools was also very particular. Cultivators could use Dantian real fire to concoct medicinal pills and refine tools, but using Dantian real fire required too much spiritual aura. Even nascent soul cultivators would be exhausted if they used Dantian real fire for a long time. Therefore, all cultivators with the right conditions used external fires. The so-called external fires included heavenly fire and earthly fire. Heavenly fire was the fire of the sun, but using the fire of the sun involved quite complicated formations and tools. As for earthly fire, Danding School's original Mount Tianhua was a typical example of earthly fire. The extreme of heavenly fire was sun real fire. The extreme of earthly fire was earthly pole real fire. And there was also samadhi real fire, which was the number one fire above the other two. These three fires were called the three great real fires. Samadhi real fire only existed in legends. No one had seen it for many years, and even the method to cultivate this fire was lost. Therefore, the best external fires for concocting medicinal pills and refining tools in the world were sun real fire and earthly pole real fire. If this sunstone could produce sun real fire, its value definitely wouldn't be lower than that of a small vein of earthly fire. If it was sold, its price would probably reach more than 10,000 spirit stones. If that was the case, with this sunstone, their trip wouldn't just be worthwhile, it would be a great harvest. However, Emotianga didn't think they could obtain this sunstone easily. Based on the previous trials, it didn't make sense for them to obtain benefits so easily this time. Taoist Fangjing also thought so the two of them were extremely careful. They first let the bird explore the path, and only stepped into this stone room after they confirmed there were no problems. However, when they reached the stone slab at the entrance, a rumble suddenly rang out, and the stone door behind them instantly dropped. The two of them simply didn't have time to react, and were already locked inside this stone room. After a moment of shock, Emotianga calmed down. If she didn't react at all, it would have been even more strange. This journey was full of dangers. If the treasure was right in front of them, and they were allowed to take it, there would probably be even more vicious traps behind them. The two of them stopped in place. Emotianga asked, "Fellow Taoist Fangjing, what do you think will be here?" Taoist Fangjing stroked his beard. "In front of us are miasma gales, illusory formations, and bewitching moonlight stones. Every place is dangerous, so I'm afraid this trial won't be easy. However, if you think about it carefully, the miasma and gales will test our defensive methods. The illusory formations will test our temperament and willpower, and the bewitching moonlight stones will test whether we can resist the temptation of treasures all over the ground, and whether we can control ourselves and not lose our minds. However, none of these trials tested our ability in fights of magical powers. In my opinion, it's very possible that..." Before he could finish speaking, they suddenly heard an earth-shaking sound, as if something was knocking heavily on the stone wall. Emotianga turned around and found the source of the sound. She furrowed her brows. It was the first stone statue leaning against the wall in the stone room. It suddenly took a step forward and walked heavily towards them. Taoist Fangjing also saw it, causing his breathing to stagnate. The two of them didn't take this stone sculpture seriously at all. When they saw it just now, they thought it was just a decoration of this place, like a mural carved on the wall. But in the blink of an eye, it actually turned into a living creature. "Fellow Taoist Yi, this..." Emotianga had already activated her protective aura and summoned the white silk handkerchief and the shuttle of flying Apsara. The answer to what this trial was about had already appeared. Taoist Fangjing's guess was right. This trial tested their ability in fights of magical powers. This stone sculpture was more than 10 feet tall, which was equivalent to the height of two people. Its facial features were clearly carved. It was in the shape of a warrior. The iron armor on its body was even more distinct, and the stone sword in its hand was also carved with visible lines. A moment ago, it clearly didn't have any spiritual aura, but now it was full of spiritual aura, just like a peak stage foundation building cultivator. Emotianga quickly calculated in her mind. Both she and Taoist Fangjing were in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Although this stone sculpture was equivalent to a peak stage foundation building cultivator, it was, after all, an inanimate object with a cumbersome body. Presumably, it wouldn't be difficult to defeat it. However, the sound this stone sculpture made when it stepped on the ground was akin to an earthquake, so it most likely used a lot of strength. Emotienga had to be careful not to use her body to resist it. Just as she was thinking, the stone sculpture arrived in front of them step by step. It lifted its arm and swung its stone sword down heavily. Chapter 166. Neither of them dared to fight the stone sword head-on. The moment the stone sculpture swung down, Emotienga and Daoist Fangjing both dodged it. With a loud rumble, the flagstones on the ground caved in and shattered. Both Emotienga and Daoist Fangjing's expressions changed. They knew a nascent soul cultivator's immortal's cave must have been reinforced with materials, but the sword the stone sculpture swung down didn't seem to use much strength, yet it easily pierced through the flagstones. They asked themselves if they could do it. Without much time to think, the stone sculpture swung its sword again. The power of this sword strike was also very fierce. However, just as they guessed, this stone sculpture's strength was great, and its body was cumbersome. But its speed was also very slow. And speed was precisely what she was good at. Stepping on the white silk handkerchief, Emotienga dashed away without being touched by the stone sculpture in the slightest. Daoist Fangjing also judged the situation in a flash. After he dodged the stone sculpture's second attack, he swung the horsetail whisk in his hand. The whisk turned into thousands of long threads that pierced the stone sculpture. In Emotienga's opinion, Daoist Fangjing's horsetail whisk wasn't a high-grade magic tool, but she didn't know how Daoist Fangjing refined it. But it was extremely powerful. This technique of transforming whisks into threads was similar to the flying needles she often used to launch sneak attacks. Moreover, while the flying needles were tangible, the whisks were intangible, and the only thing that increased was the spiritual aura. The thousands of whisks suddenly flew at an extremely fast speed. The stone sculpture couldn't dodge them, or rather, it didn't dodge them at all. Its entire body was enveloped by the whisks. The spiritual aura surged and countless dust rose. Both Emotienga and Daoist Fangjing were stunned. Soon after, they both retreated, held their breaths, and waved their sleeves. This immortal's cave had been closed for countless years, so the stone sculpture was already covered in dust. Daoist Fangjing's attack sent all the dust flying. The two of them didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They made such a blunder as soon as they attacked. However, the stone sculpture wasn't damaged at all. The two of them couldn't help but look serious. Fellow Daoisti, Daoist Fangjing's expression darkened. This thing's defense is amazing. It can't be damaged. Emotienga didn't know, but he clearly knew that he had painstakingly practiced this shape-shifting technique for more than 100 years. If he used it on a late-stage foundation-building cultivator, his defensive barrier would be broken, but this stone sculpture wasn't affected at all. Once Daoist Fangjing spoke, the stone sculpture paused for a moment as if it was listening to him. In the next second, it adjusted its direction, then suddenly swung its sword at Daoist Fangjing. The power of the sword strike was indeed terrifying. Daoist Fangjing managed to dodge it in time, but he was still injured by the sword aura, causing him to let out a muffled groan. Emotienga acted just in time. The shuttle of flying Apsara transformed into several golden rays that flew towards the stone statue. After several poochie-poochie sounds, Emotienga's expression darkened. The flying Apsara shuttle's golden light didn't even leave a mark on the stone statue. Ever since she obtained the shuttle of flying Apsara, Emotienga had always relied on this magic tool. Later on, she heard from Lord Daoist Jingha that its main material was 1,000-year-old gold essence, which was mixed with heavenly transformation stone, making it comparable to a magic weapon. It was a magic tool he specially made for Qin Shoujing when he built his foundation. 1,000-year-old gold essence was usually used on flying swords to increase their sharpness, so although the shuttle of flying Apsara didn't have any sharp edges, it was still very sharp. Up until now, she hadn't encountered anything that could be cut by the golden rays. Nevertheless, the shuttle of flying Apsara was completely useless against this stone statue. Emotienga's expression darkened. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. However, she suddenly heard Daoist Fangjing, who was struggling under the stone statue's attack, shouting, "Use spells! Use spells to attack!" Emotienga was startled, but she immediately reacted. She withdrew the shuttle of flying Apsara, then made a hand seal to cast the cold wind spell. Stone came from earth, wood suppressed earth. Wind came from wood, water came from wood. This cold wind spell was a compound spell of the 5 elements, which included water and wood elements. The stone statue's speed was originally slow, so the cold wind spell just happened to hit its weak point. Once the cold wind spell was cast, the stone statue slowed down, and its speed became even slower. Although its strength and sword aura were astonishing, its speed was extremely slow. It simply couldn't hit Daoist Fangjing's body. Daoist Fangjing was finally able to extricate himself. Fellow Daoist Yi. Daoist Fangjing's breathing was heavy. Obviously his injuries weren't light. Earth suppresses water. It'd be better to directly use a wood entanglement spell to bind it. I tested it just now. Its sword aura is in a straight line, so we just need to avoid it. Emotinga didn't say anything and just nodded. Instead of using the cold wind spell, she clasped her hands together, condensed spiritual aura, and started to cast the high-level wood element spell, rustling fallen wood. Countless withered leaves rose, the wind whistled, and countless vines grew from the ground, binding the stone statue. With spiritual aura shot towards the stone statue, under the green light that filled the sky, the stone statue was bound by the vines and couldn't budge. It wanted to brandish its sword, but the vines once again wrapped around its sword-wielding hand. Neither the horsetail whisk nor the shuttle of flying Apsara could break the stone statue. Under the entanglement of its spiritual aura, it was finally firmly restrained. But this wasn't the end. Although this stone statue was restrained by Wood's spiritual aura, Emotinga's cultivation level wasn't high enough, so she couldn't directly knock it down, and could only bind it. Moreover, this stone statue's strength was astonishing, so it would take a lot of effort to bind it. Fellow Daoist Fangjing. Emotinga couldn't help but furrow her brows when she sensed the spiritual aura in her body was draining like crazy. I'm consuming too much spiritual aura. I can't hold on for too long. Daoist Fangjing also clasped his hands together and started to cast a wood element spell. With Daoist Fangjing's support, Emotinga finally heaved a sigh of relief. She had never encountered an opponent who directly relied on formidable strength like this. Even though it was a stone statue without any intelligence, it was still very difficult to deal with. She recalled the time she encountered a 5th-ranked double-headed eagle during the demonic beast riot. Her cultivation level was a bit lower than it was now, but she didn't feel this helpless. She couldn't blame the ancients for saying, "One strong man can defeat 10 skilled men." The hardest technique to crack was having no technique at all. Amidst the sky-filling green light, the stone statue once again turned around to listen, seemingly looking for the source of the spiritual aura. Emotinga's heart stirred. She raised her hand and threw the shuttle of flying Apsara again. This time, it turned into a long golden thread and shot towards the stone statue's ears. This time, the golden thread drilled into the stone statue's ears without any obstruction. With a soft rip, the stone statue's body became heavy and it stopped moving. Emotinga stopped casting the spell and focused on controlling the shuttle of flying Apsara. Clanging sounds rang out incessantly. A moment later, the momentum from the stone statue's body dissipated, and it finally stopped moving. However, in an instant it released a strange spiritual aura. Daoist Fangjing finally caught his breath. He asked, "Fellow Daoist Yi, how did you know its weakness was its ears?" Emotinga wiped the sweat on her face and answered, "Fellow Daoist, did you notice? Before it makes a move, it always listens first." "I see." Daoist Fangjing sighed in admiration. He thought in his heart that women were indeed more meticulous. Although he noticed something was wrong, he didn't expect this to be its weakness. Emotinga put away the shuttle of flying Apsara and the white silk handkerchief, then looked at Daoist Fangjing. "Fellow Daoist, how's your injury?" Daoist Fangjing hastily swallowed a medicinal pill then shook his head. "It's nothing. It's just a small injury." Emotinga didn't ask anymore. She walked forward then crouched down to examine the stone statue. When she was controlling the shuttle of flying Apsara, she sensed that the inside of the stone statue wasn't made of stone like the outside. However, no matter how she looked at it, it was a whole piece of stone without any cracks. After Daoist Fangjing took the medicinal pill, he also walked towards her and said, That's strange. This stone is so hard. How can we open it? Emotienga tilted her head and pondered for a moment. Then she started to feel the stone statue's head. There weren't any connecting gaps, but there were traces of casting. In other words, this stone statue could actually be melted? She wondered what kind of real fire would be needed to melt such a hard stone. Could this be the art of engineering? She muttered to herself. The art of engineering had been lost in the cultivation world for a long time. She only heard that some people could make aura refining puppets to guard mansions and serve tea. But their fighting abilities were weak. This stone statue obviously didn't have any external spiritual aura supporting it, but its cultivation level was in the peak stage of the foundation building realm. If it was the art of engineering, wouldn't it have been lost a long time ago? Fellow Taoist, ye also knows about the art of engineering? Taoist Fangjing asked curiously. Emotienga raised her head. I read about it in a book. Could it be that Taoist Fangjing knows about this technique? Taoist Fangjing smiled bitterly. Of course not. The art of engineering has long been lost. I'm just an individual cultivator. How could I possibly learn it? It's just that I'm an old man who's lived for a long time. So I've heard a lot. I've also heard a bit about the art of engineering. Oh, then what does fellow Taoist think about this stone statue? Is it the art of engineering? It's very similar. Taoist Fangjing nodded. Cultivators can also use spiritual aura to control puppets. That's not the art of engineering. But this thing can move freely without an owner. So it should be the art of engineering. Emotienga also thought the same. In that case, didn't the master of this place know the real art of engineering? After staring at the stone sculpture for a long time, Emotienga finally said, Fellow Taoist Fangjing, I want this thing. If there's anything else later, you can choose first. What do you think? This. Taoist Fangjing hesitated. He naturally also wanted this stone sculpture. If he brought it out, he could sell it to cultivation clans or cultivation groups. For people who wanted to study the art of engineering, a peak stage foundation building puppet should be worth at least several thousand spirit stones, right? However, when he saw how determined Emotienga was, he nodded without hesitation. Firstly, he didn't want to offend her. Secondly, she promised him some benefits, so he'd only lose some spirit stones. Alright, this thing isn't very useful to me. If fellow Taoist wants it, I'll give it to you. Emotienga smiled, then put the stone sculpture into her Qianquan bag. Thank you. I'll definitely keep my promise. If there are treasures later, fellow Taoist can take more. Taoist Fangjing smiled. Just as he was about to say something polite, his expression suddenly changed. He looked behind Emotienga and said, Fellow Taoist, ye look? Upon hearing Taoist Fangjing's cry of alarm, Emotienga turned around, and her expression also changed. All of a sudden, the other stone sculptures started to move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 stone sculptures. The 2 of them were deathly pale. Even though they already knew the weaknesses of the stone sculptures, there were still too many of them. Emotienga didn't have much time to think. She flew up and stopped in midair. The shuttle of flying Apsara turned into a golden ray and went straight for the ears of one of the stone sculptures. That stone sculpture paused, then raised its sword. Its sword aura soared to the sky and blocked the golden ray. Emotienga clenched her teeth. Just now, she used the shuttle of flying Apsara while she was trapped by a wood element spell, so the stone sculptures couldn't react at all. But it was different now. No matter how slow these stone sculptures' reactions were, their sword aura was so powerful that they could block it with just a raise of their hands. What should I do? Her mind raced, but she couldn't think of a solution. Chapter 167. Each of the 5 stone statues was in the late stage of the foundation building realm. Emotienga glanced at them and quickly analyzed the situation in her mind. Since the door was already closed, this was a secret room. Aside from defeating these stone statues, there was no other way. They already knew the stone statues' weaknesses, but how to crack their sword aura was still a problem. Each of these 5 stone statues had extraordinary strength. When they brandished their sword aura was overbearing, interweaving into a sword net. Even if they were slow, her shuttle of flying Apsara couldn't break them. Moreover, These stone statues didn't have consciousness, so even a hallucinatory item like the enchanting lantern couldn't affect them. Should I defeat them one by one? Emotianga looked at Taoist Fangjing and said, "Fellow Taoist, I'll deal with 4. You deal with 1. Taoist Fangjing immediately nodded. All right, if it was one-on-one, even if their cultivation levels were slightly lower, it wouldn't be too difficult to kill them if they knew their weaknesses. After reaching an agreement with Taoist Fangjing, Emotianga stood in midair, took out a talisman from her Qingquan bag and sighed. As the advanced inner disciple of a nascent soul cultivator, how could she not have any treasures? All these years, although Lord Taoist Jinghe didn't teach her about cultivation, he didn't hesitate to give her other things. This time, when she left the mountain, he even gave her several life-saving treasures. However, she thought it was best to handle things she could handle by herself. Relying too much on other things wouldn't be good for her growth. However, it was difficult for her to even keep herself alive now, so she naturally had to use whatever methods she had. Otherwise, if she lost her life, it would be a huge loss. Emotianga took the talisman, then closed her eyes and started to chant. Along with the chant, her whole body emitted a white spiritual light like mist. This spiritual light was a symbol of spiritual aura gathering. The spiritual aura became denser, and the spiritual light became brighter and brighter. When she finished chanting, she opened her eyes and shouted, "Go!" The talisman was ignited, turning into 4 flames that instantly swept towards the 4 stone statues. The stone statues brandished their swords as if they wanted to cut them like before. But this time it was useless. The 4 flames didn't move at all. They directly penetrated the sword aura and enveloped the 4 stone statues. The 4 stone statues stopped moving, maintaining their posture of raising their swords. Emotianga shouted, "Taoist Fangjing, quickly! I can only maintain it for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn." Once she used this move, the whole stone room was shrouded in spiritual aura. Taoist Fangjing was dumbfounded, but once he heard her shout, he seemed to have woken up from a dream. He hastily pounced on the only remaining stone sculpture. Taoist Fangjing waved his hand, causing a talisman to fly out of his hand. It was the earth element magic art, thick soil carrying the earth. The ground under the stone sculpture's feet instantly turned into yellow soil. The soil directly spread and trapped the sculpture. The stone statue brandished its sword in a daze, but how could it cut through the soil beneath its feet? Taking advantage of this opportunity, Taoist Fangjing raised his horsetail whisk. Countless strands of whisk flew towards the stone statue. This time, the stone statue brandished its sword to block. It finally managed to block the attack. Taoist Fangjing immediately retrieved the whisk thread, then threw several talismans. Foundation building realm talismans were different from aura refining realm talismans. Even if you had the money, it would still be very difficult to buy them. This time, Taoist Fangjing really put in a lot of effort. Under the attack of several high-level talismans, the stone statue gradually became unable to wield its sword. Countless whisk threads were once again thrown out. 2 of them drilled into the stone statue's ears. With 2 chi-chi sounds, the stone statue finally stopped moving. Emotianga heaved a sigh of relief. She once again took out another talisman and chanted the incantation, trapping the 4 stone statues just like before. Needless to say, Fangjing flung his horsetail whisk and pierced it into the stone statue's ears. The 4 stone statues fell one by one. Emotianga heaved a long sigh. She couldn't hold on any longer, so she fell to the ground. Her legs went soft, so she sat down. These 2 talismans weren't talismans used by ordinary foundation building cultivators. They were top-grade talismans. In fact, top-grade talismans were like magic weapons. They didn't belong to any rank. Only core formation cultivators and above could draw these talismans. Part of the power of magic weapons was sealed inside them, so their power was extraordinary, just like real magic weapons. It was common knowledge that aura refining and foundation building cultivators could also use magic weapons. However, in their hands, they could only display 1% or even 1,000th of the power of magic weapons. They simply couldn't compare to the magic weapons of core formation cultivators or nascent soul cultivators. However, this kind of talisman was different. It sealed the power of real magic weapons. Although it couldn't compare to a nascent soul cultivator's, it wasn't inferior to a core formation cultivator's attack. However, this kind of talisman could only be used once. Even so, activating these two talismans consumed a lot of spiritual aura, so Emotienga felt exhausted for a while. Nevertheless, there was someone else next to her, so she didn't dare to rest too much. She swallowed several restorative panaceas, adjusted her breathing, then stood up. Fellow Taoist Fangjing, how is it? Taoist Fangjing also rested for a bit, before he stood up to examine the surroundings. Right now he was carefully examining the things behind the stone statues. Taoist Fangjing didn't stop examining them. He just turned his body slightly and said, "Fellow Taoist Ji, quickly come and take a look." Judging from his tone, he seemed to have discovered something. Emotienga stood up and walked towards him. Taoist Fangjing pointed at the stone wall. "Fellow Taoist Yi, look carefully." Emotienga moved closer, but she was stunned. She saw that the stone wall was densely engraved with fine murals. These murals were carved meticulously, but their contents were messy. It was as if someone carved something on the wall whenever they thought of it. Some were people, some were flowers, plants, strange beasts, and some were spells. Emotienga looked at the murals one by one, but she was pleasantly surprised. The master of this place was indeed a genius. There were some secret techniques she'd never heard of before. For example, there was a kind of teleportation technique called Flash of Wind and Thunder, which could allow the user to retreat several hundred feet away in an instant. If one cultivated it to a higher level, it wouldn't be a problem for them to move several hundred feet away. After all, the so-called teleportation technique had been passed down to the present day, but most of it didn't live up to its name. It merely relied on its extremely fast speed to make it look like teleportation. True teleportation techniques were rarely passed down. They were usually passed down as secret techniques in big cultivation groups. Xianqing School also had one, but only core formation cultivators could practice their teleportation technique. There were also some carelessly written spells that were incomplete, which made Emotienga quite disappointed. She hoped to find some records of mechanisms, but unfortunately, there was none. In the end, Emotienga found a paragraph of text in the corner. "My name is Su Jiwei, a disciple of Venerable Swordsman Xuanzu of Gujian sect. I formed my gold core at 100 years old, entered the nascent soul realm at 300 years old, betrayed Gujian sect at 400 years old, lived in seclusion in the Wind Breath Valley of Mount Jiling in Jin country, called myself Wanderer Ziwei. I've lived here in seclusion for 1,000 years, never taking even half a step into Kunwu. Every time I think about the first half of my life, I'm filled with pain and regret. I couldn't see Xylan one last time before I passed away. My 1,000-year regret. The engravings at the end were messy." Emotienga carefully examined them, and found that they were the two words Xylan written over and over again. Xylan? This was obviously a name, and it sounded like it belonged to a woman. Wanderer Ziwei didn't mention this name in the other murals, but in this monologue he repeatedly mentioned it. Judging from his tone, he seemed to miss this person very much, but he didn't dare to mention it. It wasn't until he passed away that he couldn't help but write it down. After reading this paragraph, Emotienga couldn't help but feel puzzled. This Wanderer Ziwei, since he was a disciple of Gujian sect, and he formed his nascent soul at such a young age, why did he betray the sect? For a big cultivation group like Gujian sect, betraying the sect was a very serious matter. Even if there was a conflict, since he was already in the nascent soul realm, he could have left the mountain and become an elder in name. There was no need for him to betray the sect. Moreover, after he betrayed the sect, he lived in seclusion in the secular world. It seemed like he didn't want anything, so it didn't seem like he had a conflict of interest. But if there was no conflict of interest, why did he betray the sect? Later, he said that every time he thought about the first half of his life, he was filled with pain and regret. A cultivator from a big cultivation group formed his nascent soul at such a young age. What pain could he have experienced in the first half of his life? What could make him regret to the point of death? If these matters were connected, betraying the sect because of regret, living in seclusion in the secular world because of regret, How serious was this matter? Finally, there was that Xylan. For a nascent soul cultivator, was there anything they couldn't see if they wanted to see someone? Unless that person had disappeared, or he didn't dare to see her. But here came the problem. Disappearing was fine, but what matter was so serious that he didn't dare to see her? Was it related to the matter he regretted? Emotienga felt the matter in front of her was confusing and couldn't be explained at all. Taoist Fangjing also came over to read this passage. He said with astonishment, Gujian sect? The master of this place is actually a senior from Gujian sect. But why is he so proficient in the illusory formation and the art of mechanisms? This doesn't seem like the work of a sword cultivator. Emotienga was stunned. Yes, this should be the biggest doubt. Gujian sect was a sect of sword cultivators, so this wanderer Ziwei should also be a sword cultivator. However, his actions didn't seem like a sword cultivator's. When they first entered the valley, they encountered the gales and miasma caused by a formation. Later they entered an illusory formation. Who could lay this kind of formation, unless they were a grandmaster? Moreover, the Flying Five Elements platform almost made people think it was a senior from Tianliang School. Finally, there was this stone room, the peak stage foundation building puppet, and the art of mechanisms. In the cultivation world, the most traditional and most populous cultivators were Dharma cultivators. This kind of cultivators followed the prescribed order on their cultivation path, and mainly relied on spells, magic weapons, and medicinal pills. Sword cultivators, talisman cultivators, medical cultivators, martial cultivators, and so on were all unorthodox Daos. Among them, because sword cultivators were extremely strong in fights of magical powers, they were the most populous group. However, compared to Dharma cultivators, their total number was only 1 in 100. The reason why Dharma cultivators were the most populous was because their studies were orthodox. They could dabble in any kind of unorthodox Daos, and had a high chance of making realm breakthroughs. Sword cultivators were strong in fights of magical powers, but they spent their entire lives nurturing their swords, so their chances of making realm breakthroughs were rather low. Therefore, generally, sword cultivators only concentrated on cultivating their swords and rarely learned other things. However, everything laid out here subverted this convention. A sword cultivator who was proficient in formations, the art of mechanisms, and extremely knowledgeable, was simply too frightening. Emotienga was 100% sure that the master of this place was definitely a rare genius. Fellow Taoisti, let's not talk about other things first. Let's take the sunstone first. Taoist Fangjing was actually thinking about this object after he finished looking at the mural. Right, this object was the most valuable thing here. Emotienga didn't oppose him. Alright, I agreed to fellow Taoist's request earlier. Now fellow Taoists can choose first. Fellow Taoists can take an extra portion. Taoist Fangjing was beside himself with joy. He immediately flew up and was about to take the sunstone hanging above him. Rumble! A burst of spiritual aura came out of nowhere and struck Taoist Fangjing down. Chapter 168. With a bang, Taoist Fangjing fell heavily on the ground. Emotienga immediately summoned her white silk handkerchief, but that spiritual aura didn't appear again. From beginning to end, she didn't know where that spiritual aura came from. Taoist Fangjing, who was lying on the ground, groaned and struggled to get up. His face was pale. This, fellow Taoist Fangjing, it seems the master of this place doesn't want us to take the sunstone. After confirming there was no danger, Emotienga put down her magic weapon and slowly scanned the stone room. This was obviously a technique that surpassed their realm, but it didn't kill them. It seemed the master just didn't want them to take the sunstone. Taoist Fangjing looked up at the sunstone on the top of the stone wall, his face full of unwillingness. If that was the case, wouldn't this trip be returning empty-handed? At that moment, several rumbling noises were heard. It seemed one of the stone slabs was moved. The two of them looked towards the source of the noise, and were both overjoyed. The stone wall in the innermost part of the stone room suddenly moved, revealing a stone table with several things on it. However, after the previous incidents, the two of them became more cautious. After being overjoyed, They didn't immediately go to take the things. Taoist Fangjing once again released his first-rank spiritual beast. The bird screeched then flew towards the stone table in a wobbly manner. Not only Taoist Fangjing, but Mo Tiange was also extremely nervous. Ever since they came here, they hadn't obtained anything except for a mother of moonstone and several bewitching moonstones. Instead, they used up several magic weapons and talismans. There were so many treasures here, but they weren't allowed to take them. The bird safely landed on the stone table. Taoist Fangjing's expression showed a hint of happiness, but soon, he became even more nervous. He ordered the bird to pick up something with its beak. The bird flapped its wings on the table and ran towards a bell-shaped object. Soon after, it picked up the bell handle and was about to fly away. Bang! The smoke that came out of nowhere suddenly dispersed, and a spiritual aura suddenly sprang out. Mo Tiange was about to use her protective aura, but in an instant, she lost control of the spiritual aura in her body and couldn't move. At that moment, a deep and dignified voice rang out in the stone room. "Junior, who came to my Ziwei's Immortal's cave?" Mo Tiange was stunned. Could it be? Taoist Fangjing finally regained his composure. He answered first. "Junior Fangjing, a little individual cultivator. Greetings to Senior Ziwei." After a nascent soul cultivator passed away in meditation, he would cut off a part of his divine sense and store it somewhere. Presumably, this could only be done by the master of this place, the nascent soul cultivator, who called himself Wanderer Ziwei. Junior Mo Tiange, a disciple of Xianqing School. Greetings to Senior Ziwei. Faced with the nascent soul cultivator's question, Mo Tiange still chose to speak the truth, even though she was only using her divine sense. Xianqing School? Upon hearing what she said, Wanderer Ziwei was slightly surprised. Soon after he asked, "Who's that Lord Taoist Pill Spirit to you?" "Tao Lord Pill Spirit?" Mo Tiange pondered for a moment then answered. "Lord Taoist Danling was a senior of my group. He passed away 5,000 years ago." "It's been 5,000 years." Upon hearing what she said, Wanderer Ziwei was silent for a long time before he finally heaved a long sigh. "It's actually been 5,000 years. Xylan, it seems you've also." In the next second, his voice regained its calmness. He said, "Juniors, what's your request for coming to my Ziwei's Immortal's cave?" Taoist Fangjing was delighted to hear that. Just as he was about to speak, Mo Tiange beat him to it. "May I know Senior's purpose in luring us here?" A foundation-building cultivator, talking to a nascent soul cultivator, like that was indeed arrogant. Afraid Mo Tiange would say something wrong, Taoist Fangjing hastily said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist, don't talk nonsense." Mo Tiange remained unmoved. She dared to say that because she knew Wanderer Ziwei wouldn't get angry. Sure enough, in the next second, Wanderer Ziwei smiled. "Junior, you're really quick-witted. You're right. I indeed led you here on purpose." "What's Senior's purpose?" Wanderer Ziwei didn't answer but asked instead. "Juniors, what do you think of my Immortal's cave?" This time, Taoist Fangjing answered first. "Senior's Immortal's cave is worthy of being a nascent soul cultivator's Immortal's cave. There are layers of formations and a lot of treasures." "Formations, treasures?" Wanderer Ziwei repeated then suddenly asked. "Then do you want to get them?" Taoist Fangjing was both surprised and delighted, but he didn't dare to be rude. He cast a glance at Mo Tiange then answered, "Of course. But with Senior's abilities, we don't have a choice." "Hee Junior, you're quite slippery." Wanderer Ziwei dismissed them with a smile. "Don't worry, I'm not a cruel person. If you honestly answer me, I naturally won't hurt you." What he said made Mo Tiange secretly criticize him. Not a cruel person? They haven't even entered this Immortal's cave. But out of the 9 people, only the 2 of them are still in good condition. Taoist Fangjing is also injured from head to toe. He's still not a cruel person. Do you have any objections? Wanderer Ziwei's voice suddenly sounded, as if it was right next to her ear. Mo Tiange was startled. Could it be that Wanderer Ziwei can read minds? Mind reading? More or less. Before she could finish her question, Wanderer Ziwei already said, "When I was alive, I once tried to advance to the deification realm. Although I failed, I possess part of a deification cultivator's abilities. Mind reading is one of them. Emotienga was stunned. That seemed to be the case. When she was with Yuan Bao and Zhong Muling, she had a vague feeling that she couldn't hide anything. It was slightly different from the feeling when she couldn't help but tell the truth, when she was under spiritual aura pressure. In that case, didn't this mean that Wanderer Ziwei had already reached the peak of the nascent soul realm? It was just that he hadn't truly advanced to the deification realm yet. Oh, Junior, you've actually met deification cultivators? An invisible spiritual aura circled around Emotienga, and she asked. Emotienga was startled. She hastily concealed her spirit and chi to prevent herself from letting her imagination run wild. Mind reading. If I overthink it, won't I let others know everything? Just as she thought about that, before she could say anything, she heard Wanderer Ziwei say with a smile, Junior, don't panic. Mind reading has to be actively used, so I won't use it on you. You can take your time and tell me. What he said sounded rather amiable. Emotienga heaved a sigh of relief, but she was still worried. She answered, yes, Junior indeed had the honor of meeting deification seniors. Oh, what were the names of those two people? How did you meet them? One of them was surnamed Zhong, and his name was Muling. The other was called Taoist Yuan Bao, but I don't know if that's his real name or his Taoist name. Zhong Muling Yuan Bao. The voice murmured. They've actually reached the deification realm. Emotienga was surprised. Senior knows these two deification seniors? Sort of. Wanderer Ziwei said faintly. They're cultivators from the same era as me, but they came from Yunzhong and aren't cultivators from the celestial pole. Emotienga also knew about this. Yuan Bao once told her a lot about them. They were originally cultivators from Yunzhong, but later on, they wandered around and arrived in the celestial pole. After they advanced to the deification realm, they had no fixed abode, and could only wander around the virtual sky world. All right, Junior, tell me, how are they doing? They're very well. Based on what he said, there seemed to be no old grudges between Zhong Muling and Yuan Bao, so Emotienga felt relieved. During the demonic beast riot last time, Junior accidentally broke into the two deification seniors' immortals' caves, and was saved by them. That's how I met them. After Junior recovered, I left. It seems they came here to travel. Wanderer Ziwei didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, he finally heaved a deep sigh. Hearing about my old friends made me sigh with emotion. Junior, since you and my old friends are old friends, I won't make things difficult for you. To tell you the truth, in these 5,000 years, every once in a while, I would weaken the formation and release spiritual chi to lure foundation establishment cultivators like you to come here. Unfortunately, not a single person has ever come here. Sure enough, Emotienga had long expected this, but she didn't know why Wanderer Ziwei didn't lure core formation or nascent soul cultivators here. I had a lifelong regret that I couldn't resolve before I passed away, so I sealed my divine sense in my immortal's cave. If someone passed the test and reached this place, they could come out and meet me. If you can help me with this matter, I'll give you treasures. Emotienga and Taoist Fangjin glanced at each other. Both of them were a bit surprised. 6 of them died. 1 was seriously injured, and only 2 of them reached this place in one piece. It was actually because a nascent soul cultivator, who passed away, already had something to ask of them. Moreover, this still didn't explain why Wanderer Ziwei didn't let core formation or nascent soul cultivators come here. Wanderer Ziwei was a peak stage nascent soul cultivator who was just a step away from the deification realm. Presumably, nascent soul cultivators would scramble for treasures like ducks. Don't you understand why I let foundation building cultivators come here? Taoist Fangjin cupped his hands. Senior, please forgive us. Juniors indeed don't understand. If Senior has something to ask of us, wouldn't it be better to let core formation or nascent soul seniors come? They're quite capable, so it'd be easy for them to complete Senior's task. Hehe, that being said, why would core formation and nascent soul cultivators be afraid of a divine sense? No matter how high my cultivation level was in the past, I'm only left with this bit of divine sense now, so I can't intimidate them, Wanderer Ziwei said faintly. Besides, the task I asked of you has nothing to do with your cultivation level. That was true. If a core formation or nascent soul cultivator discovered an immortal's cave like this, they'd probably go looking for treasures by force. Even if Wanderer Ziwei was a genius when he was alive, he was only left with a wisp of his divine sense now. Emotinga said, "Senior, aren't you afraid that we'll agree but won't do it? Perhaps Junior will go back to my school and inform my masters, then order them to come here and look for treasures?" "Ha! Little girl, you're quite bold," Wanderer Ziwei said with a smile. However, in the next second his voice turned cold. "Since I let foundation building cultivators come here, I naturally have a way to deal with you." Right after he finished speaking, Emotinga suddenly felt a pain in her head. That wisp of spiritual aura drilled into her brain, but it immediately withdrew. Ah! She couldn't help but scream in pain. After the pain passed, she felt nothing was amiss. She turned around and saw that Taoist Fangjing was also bewildered. Wanderer Ziwei said indifferently, "I left imprints in your sea of knowledge. If you don't come back in time, these imprints will activate, and at that time." At this point, the threat in his words was very obvious. Emotinga was shocked and angry. You. She wasn't a person who went back on her word. If this Wanderer Ziwei gave her treasures and asked her to do something, she would naturally keep her promise. However, this kind of method really made her feel indignant. "Junior," Wanderer Ziwei said with a smile, "don't be agitated. Don't forget that your life is still in my hands." With this reminder, Emotinga managed to suppress her anger, but she still couldn't help but sneer. "Senior, since you know I'm a disciple of Xianqing School, so what if I left an imprint? I'll go back to my school and ask the seniors in my school to resolve it with me." "Haha, resolve it?" Wanderer Ziwei's voice was full of arrogance. "There aren't any deification cultivators in your school, right? Even late-stage nascent soul cultivators can't resolve my unique technique." After he said that, he said curiously, "Girl, are you always so direct with your words? Aren't you afraid I'll kill you? After all, there are two of you. You're not my only choice." "Really?" Emotinga said coldly. "Senior waited for several thousand years before the two of us finally came. Senior, aren't you afraid you won't be able to complete your task?" Wanderer Ziwei paused for a moment, then smiled bitterly. "You're just a little girl in the foundation building realm. How can you be so sharp-tongued? It doesn't matter if you're afraid or not. You should rejoice that I've been cultivating my mind and temperament here for more than 1,000 years, so I'm no longer as hot-tempered as I used to be. Otherwise," once he finished speaking, he once again muttered to himself, "However, you're very similar to her." "Her? Could it be that Xylan?" Wanderer Ziwei said, "All right, I won't talk nonsense with you. I won't be harsh. As long as you finish the task I'm giving you within 100 years and come here, I'll give you all of my treasures. I'll give them to whoever finishes first, but you'd better not kill each other for the sake of treasures. The imprint I left in your sea of knowledge will tell me, so I won't give you anything at that time." "All of my treasures?" Upon hearing what he said, Taoist Fangjing promptly asked, "May I ask what Senior wants us to do?" "I want you to find a person's corpse, bring it to me, and bury it with me." Emotinga blurted out, "Could it be the Xylan that Senior keeps talking about?" "Correct." Wanderer Ziwei's voice was still faint, but Emotinga felt it was filled with endless desolation. "I already knew I wouldn't be able to see her. It's enough as long as I'm buried with her." Emotinga couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "She? Who is she?" Her question made Wanderer Ziwei silent. After a long time, so long that Emotinga thought he wouldn't answer, she finally heard his voice. "She's my wife." Emotinga was dumbfounded. Since she's Senior's wife, why? "Junior, why do you have so many questions?" Wanderer Ziwei smiled bitterly. "I'm only separated from my wife, and couldn't be together anymore. So I want you to bring her corpse back. You're still trying to get to the bottom of this?" Despite that, he sighed softly then said slowly, "My wife's surname is Xiao, and her name is Xylan. She's a cultivator from Xuanji School. Do you know about Xuanji School?" Taoist Fangjing said in a low voice. Xuanji School was established by the original disciples after Tianliang School was exterminated several thousand years ago. However, Xuanji School no longer exists today. It was divided into Giga's school, Chiqiao sect, and several other groups. Wanderer Ziwei was stunned. Xuanji school also? Correct. As far as Junior knows, it was because of internal strife. However, it's been a long time, and Junior's only an individual cultivator, so I don't know the inside story. Fate. In the end, they couldn't escape the fate of being exterminated. Wanderer Ziwei sighed then said, "How's Gujian sect now? It still exists, right?" Right now, Gujian sect is the third largest cultivation group in the celestial pole. It's very powerful and has many disciples. That's good. When Gujian sect was mentioned, Wanderer Ziwei's tone was indifferent, as if he didn't care. After a pause, he said slowly, "I was originally a swordsman in the secular world. When I was 20, my master discovered that I had spiritual roots, so I came to Gujian sect. Later, I became a sword cultivator and wholeheartedly cultivated. When I was 100 years old, I formed my gold core and reached the nascent soul realm at 300 years old. I don't dare to say I'm a genius, but I'm still a rare sword cultivator. Because I was born in the secular world of Jianghu, I've always had a fiery temper. My Gujian sect has always been combative, so we didn't restrict our disciples. When I just formed my gold core, several senior martial brothers, and I exterminated Tianliang school, because someone from Tianliang school offended my senior martial brother." Mo Tiange was a bit shocked. Gujian sect now adopted the image of the righteous path, and always restricted its disciples. As it turned out, it was also. At that time, I didn't take this matter to heart. Who would have thought that 100 years later, I'd meet a little girl in the foundation building realm? When he spoke about this matter, Wanderer Ziwei's voice finally fluctuated. "That was my wife Xylan. I knew she was a disciple of Xuanji school, but I didn't care. So what if I was the one who did that? With my strength and identity at that time, if I wanted to marry her, how could a small cultivation group like Xuanji school dare to refuse? However, I didn't want Xylan to know, lest she thought I was using my power to oppress people. Xylan only knew it was a disciple of my Gujian sect who exterminated Tianliang school. But she didn't know I was one of them. Although she hated Gujian sect, she still married me. We were husband and wife for 200 years. I successfully formed my nascent soul, and Xylan also formed her gold core. Her aptitude was excellent, and with my help, forming her nascent soul was almost inevitable. I thought we'd continue loving each other like this for 1,000 years. 200 years. Wanderer Ziwei should be 400 years old now, right? Was that when he betrayed his sect and lived in seclusion here? Right at that time, Xylan heard from my senior martial brother that I participated in the extermination of Tianliang school. So she came back to question me and severed ties with me. Only then did I know Xylan wasn't just a disciple of Xuanji school. Her clan used to be a great clan in Tianliang school. In other words, her elders and relatives might have all died in my hands. Wanderer Ziwei narrated faintly with a calm tone. We've been husband and wife for 200 years, so how could I not know her temper? She was usually kind, but she was very stubborn. Once she decided on something, she absolutely wouldn't change her mind. Since she severed ties with me, she wouldn't see me again for the rest of her life. It was just that I had delusions that she could come back. So I betrayed my sect, and came to this secular world to live in seclusion. I entrusted a letter to her telling her that if she forgave me one day, she should come find me. I regretted what happened in the past, but there was nothing I could do. I gave up everything, which meant I'd severed my past. At this point, Wanderer Ziwei finally sighed, revealing some of his emotions. Sure enough, I waited for more than 1,000 years, but she never came. Later, I heard she formed her nascent soul, and became the Grand Supreme Elder of Xuanji school. But she never came to see me. So that was what happened. Xiao Xylan was a disciple of Xuanji school. So it was no wonder there were traces of Tianliang school everywhere in this valley. They were husband and wife for 200 years. So all of this must have been passed on by Xiao Xylan to Wanderer Ziwei, right? Juniors, go to Xuanji school's former encampment, find Xylan's corpse and bury it with me. I'll give you the things I've collected in my lifetime. Chapter 169. As long as he found the corpse, he would be able to obtain the lifetime savings of a peak nascent soul cultivator. It sounded like a very good deal, but... Emotienga chuckled softly. Senior, your wife was a cultivator from 5,000 years ago, and it's hard to find where she was buried. But how dangerous would the burial place of a nascent soul cultivator be? Since your wife is a brilliant disciple of the profound secret sect, her attainments in formation should not be inferior to seniors, right? We're just foundation establishment cultivators. How can we guarantee that we'll be able to bring back the corpse safely? Correct, Taoist Fangjing said. We haven't even obtained any benefits, yet we already have a slim chance of surviving. This transaction isn't fair. Wanderer Ziwei burst out laughing. Good. If you're too stupid, then it's not worth it for me to make this deal. He paused for a moment, then said casually, You want the benefits first, sure. Not only will I give you benefits, but I will also give you 200 years. Little girl, with your age and cultivation level, 200 years should be enough for you to advance to the core formation realm, right? However, don't think that I can't do anything to you just because you've formed your gold core. Once the imprint in your sea of knowledge takes effect, it will be effective for life. With a single thought, your life and death will be in my hands. And you don't have much lifespan left. You don't even have 200 years left. Taoist Fangjing was a bit nervous. What he said just now was because he was unwilling to be ordered around by this senior, but that didn't mean that he didn't think it was a good deal. He still had 70 to 80 years left in his lifespan. During this period, it was very likely that he could find the remains of a nascent soul cultivator. By then, his chances of advancing to the core formation realm would be greatly increased. Even if he took a step back, he wasn't like the little girl beside him. In the past 200 years, he had already passed away, which meant that he hadn't put in anything. He was afraid that this senior would cancel his trading rights upon seeing that he didn't have much time left in his lifespan. Then, he would have missed a good opportunity for nothing. Emotienga didn't know whether this wanderer Ziwei was using the mind-reading technique or not. After a short pause, he said unhurriedly, You don't need to worry. Having another opportunity to find Xylan's skeleton is always good for me. In the past, in order to wait a few hundred more years, I once searched all over the celestial pole and refined a longevity pill. Now there's only one left, so I'll give it to you. Longevity pill? Longevity pill. It was a longevity pill that even nascent soul cultivators would find difficult to obtain. Taoist Fangjing was stunned for a moment, then he became ecstatic. He stammered, Senior, longevity pills. His words were already incoherent. Upon seeing his reaction, Wanderer Ziwei burst into laughter, then said to Emotienga, As for you, there are several things you can choose from. The longevity pill is useless to you, but I can give you a dustless pill. I'm sure you know that after taking this dustless pill, your chances of reaching core formation will increase. If you feel that with the help of a sect elder, core formation won't be a problem, then I can also give you a top-grade magic treasure, or a secret book from the Profound Theory sect, the Profound Theory Formation book. Which one do you want? The dustless pill, the top-grade magic treasure, the Xuanji Array book. No matter which one it was, they were all treasures that were hard to find. Among them, although the dustless pill's value couldn't compare to the longevity pill, it was the most practical for foundation-building cultivators, like them, who were about to form their gold core. The top-grade magic treasure, mentioned by a nascent soul cultivator, naturally couldn't be compared to ordinary magic treasures. Perhaps other nascent soul cultivators would also covet it. The last one was the Xuanji Array book. The Tao of Formations was broad and profound. Brilliant formation books were naturally priceless, but ordinary cultivators simply didn't have the energy to study them. They could only be used to exchange for spirit stones, so they were the most useless. But for Emotienga, Senior, Junior wants the Xuanji Array book. Oh, Wanderer Ziwei was a bit surprised. Obviously, he didn't expect she would choose this book. Emotienga said, Although dustless pills and magic treasures are precious to Junior, it's not impossible to obtain them. It's just that this Xuanji Array book is one of a kind. Correct. Since you're a Xianqing school disciple, and have such a high cultivation level at such a young age. You must be an elite disciple. Presumably, it won't be difficult for you to obtain medicinal pills and magic treasures. However, you have to think about it carefully. My medicinal pills and magic treasures aren't ordinary goods. Ordinary core formation cultivators can't even imagine them. Wanderer Ziwei's words clearly showed he was treating her master as an ordinary core formation cultivator. Mo Tiange knew that for an almost omnipotent and stunning sword cultivator like Wanderer Ziwei, his collection might not be any worse than her master's. But if she wanted to form her gold core, Lord Taoist Jinghe would naturally find dustless pills for her. Lord Taoist Jinghe might also have top-grade magic treasures. As for the Xuanji Array book, since it was Xuanji School's secret, it must have its own uniqueness. If she missed it, it would be very difficult to obtain it again. Besides, she kept an eye on Xiao Xilin. Since Xiao Xilin was the Grand Supreme Elder of Xuanji School, the place where she was buried must also be filled with traps, right? With this Xuanji Array book, the danger would be greatly reduced. Junior has made up her mind. Mo Tiange paused for a moment then continued. However, Senior, fellow Taoist Fangjing, doesn't have much time left in his life. You gave him a longevity pill. So even if he can't find it in 200 years, it won't be a loss to him unless he advances to the core formation realm. But even if I don't advance, I'll still have several hundred years to live. It'll be fine if I find his corpse. But if I can't, wouldn't that be too much of a loss? This isn't fair to me. Regarding this matter, Mo Tiange was very angry. She now had a bright future ahead of her. But someone placed a 200-year restriction on her for no reason. If she didn't succeed, she'd lose her life. How could she feel good about that? Besides, the reason she started cultivating was to fight for her freedom. Now that she was under someone else's control, it really wasn't a happy thing. It was just that this Wanderer Ziwei's methods were extraordinary, and he didn't say anything too harsh, so she was willing to endure it. As if he could sense her anger, Wanderer Ziwei chuckled. Little girl, you're really unwilling to suffer even the slightest loss. Alright, I'll give you another sunstone, how about it? As for the medicinal pills and treasures on this table, you can divide them among yourselves. In addition, as long as one of you brings back Xilin's corpse within 200 years, I'll erase the imprints in your sea of knowledge. Therefore, before you pass away, you must remember to come back and take a look. Maybe one of you has already completed it, ha. Perhaps because he lived alone for 1,000 years, this Wanderer Ziwei obviously had an evil side to his character. So he was deliberately teasing them. Mo Tiange took a deep breath to calm herself down. She mustn't be angered by him first. Alright, since it's like this, Junior can only accept it. 200 years. Junior is a bit curious. Once Senior opens the restriction that preserves your divine sense, can it last for as long as 200 years? Wanderer Ziwei hemphed coldly and arrogantly. Little girl, even if you come from a famous cultivation group, your experience and knowledge are still shallow. This is a divine sense severing technique I created myself. Not to mention 200 years. I'm afraid my divine sense will still be there even after you pass away. This Wanderer Ziwei couldn't be judged with common sense. As a sword cultivator, he was proficient in formations and mechanisms, and he could even concoct longevity pills and create all kinds of spells. Maybe he even dabbled in tool refining as well. He could practically be considered an all-rounder. So it wouldn't be surprising if he created some kind of unique divine sense technique. What about you? Seeing as Mo Tiange was speechless, Wanderer Ziwei turned to ask Taoist Fangjing. Taoist Fangjing bowed and said, that being the case, Junior will accept it. Good. Once Wanderer Ziwei finished speaking, Mo Tiange felt the stagnant spiritual aura in her body loosen. In an instant, she regained control of her body and was able to walk again. She heaved a sigh of relief, then moved her hands and feet. She found that the spiritual aura in her body was unobstructed, and she no longer felt as heavy as before. If you have any other questions, just ask. If you step out of this immortal's cave, 200 years will begin. When the 200 years are up, regardless of whether you succeed or not, you must come back to see me. If I'm in a good mood, I might give you more time. But if I'm in a bad mood, humph. 200 years. Disregarding Taoist Fangzheng, Mo Tiange felt she should be able to find some information within this time. Right now she had a lot of questions. Ever since she stepped into this valley, her head was full of questions, but she couldn't answer them because she was always in danger. Now that she heard Wanderer Ziwei's words, she asked, Junior indeed has a lot of questions. Would Senior be willing to talk about them in detail? Wanderer Ziwei said, Tell me first. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then said slowly, First of all, are the gales and miasma related to the formation Senior laid? But why was it so easy for me to crack it when I reached the bottom of the valley? Secondly, what's going on with the stone statue and the altar at the entrance of Senior's Immortal's cave? Then, Junior, you're really long-winded. Wanderer Ziwei interrupted her somewhat impatiently. I'll tell you everything from the beginning to the end, all right? The gales and miasma above the valley were indeed caused by the formation I laid. However, you were lucky to be able to crack it so easily. The answer to this question is the same as to your second question. In the past, when I lived in seclusion here, I saved several hundred mortals who were caught in the chaos of war. Seeing that they were pitiful, I brought them back to the valley. They worshipped me as their god, and the stone statue and the altar were erected by them. So I simply changed them to the entrance of my Immortal's cave. The stone statue was my wife Lan. The reason I saved them was because I thought Xylan didn't like me being violent and murderous, so I occasionally did good deeds. Therefore, when they wanted to carve the statue of a god, I let them carve it into Xylan's appearance. That way, when I occasionally came out of my Immortal's cave, I could also see her appearance. Before I passed away, these mortals had already lived at the bottom of the valley for more than 1,000 years. From generation to generation, several cultivators emerged among them, but unfortunately, their spiritual roots weren't good. Later, when I sensed my lifespan was nearing its end, I ordered those cultivators to move all the mortals out of the valley. There was an invisible spirit vein in this valley, but when I passed away, I laid this invisible spirit vein into an illusory formation, so it was no longer suitable for mortals to live in. It was precisely because there was no one here to maintain the formation that you were able to crack it so easily. I see. The illusory formation Senior laid in the hall was based on this invisible spirit vein? Why was everything fake, but the damage was real? How did we get out of the formation? Humph. Wanderer Ziwei let out a cold humph and said, This naturally involves complicated theories, which I've recorded in the Xuanji Formation book. If you thoroughly study it, you'll naturally understand. As for breaking the formation, the 9 of you either had your blood essence sucked dry, were too weak, or had enough willpower to resist the illusory formation, so there was no need for the formation to exist. Hehe. I was being lenient with this formation. It was to test your willpower. Otherwise, you would have been trapped inside for an eternity without being able to come out. This life is eternal, and eternity is only one day. Once this formation is activated, everything will end after one day. If you can't control yourself and are tempted, your blood essence will be exhausted and you'll die. If you can control yourself, your life will be like eternity, endless time. And in the end you'll go mad and die. Therefore, if you can't break the formation, you can only die. Both Mo Tiange and Taoist Fangzheng were terrified. Such a terrifying formation. Although it was an illusory formation, it was even more terrifying than a killing formation. At that moment, Taoist Fangzheng was already faintly regretting his decision. Why wasn't that Xuanji formation book given to him? So this series of hurdles was only Senior's test? Correct. Taoist Ziwei's tone was faint and somewhat grim. If you can't even withstand the gales and miasma when you enter the valley, you're basically a cripple. As for the illusory formation, it's a test of your temperament and willpower. If you can't pass it, you probably won't have the patience to find Xylan's corpse. As for the bewitching Moonstone Passage, it's a test of whether you're too greedy and calm enough. If you're easily bewitched by those treasures, I'm afraid you'll also go back on your word. Finally, there's the puppets here. If you can't even defeat 5 of them, your strength is too weak. Of course, in the end, you still have to let me see them myself. If you're too stupid, I'll kill you on the spot. The two of you aren't bad, you both passed. Emotinga couldn't help but feel angry at his words. But in the end, she forced herself to endure it. This wanderer Ziwei was indeed selfish and callous. He set up so many hurdles, but he never considered the lives of the people who entered the valley. If Xiao Xilan was really like he said and didn't like disputes, she must have loved him very deeply to be able to tolerate him for 200 years and still be a loving couple. What's wrong, little girl? Do you have a problem with that? Emotinga couldn't help but say angrily, Senior, are you using the mind-reading technique again? Upon seeing her anger, Wanderer Ziwei burst out laughing. Don't be so fierce to me. Didn't your master tell you to be respectful to your seniors? I'll endure it. Emotinga took a deep breath and stopped talking. She was used to living with Lord Taoist Jinghe. She indeed didn't treat her seniors with enough respect. However, that also depended on who it was. After half a day, she roughly figured out Wanderer Ziwei's character. If this senior didn't meet his requirements, he wouldn't even spare a glance at her. If she passed his test, he wouldn't be stingy with what he had. Emotinga's display of her little temper might even make him more fond of her. Junior also wants to ask if Senior knows the art of engineering? Oh, Wanderer Ziwei was a bit surprised to hear her question. Little girl, you actually know the art of engineering? That's rare. The art of engineering has long been lost, and there aren't many people who know about it. So Senior really knows the art of engineering? Humph. Wanderer Ziwei said proudly. I know a little. What? Do you want me to teach you the art of engineering? Emotinga hastily said. If Senior is willing to teach me, Junior will definitely do her best to find your wife's corpse. Don't tell me you're not doing your best now. Don't forget that your life is still in my hands, Wanderer Ziwei said lazily. Haha, you're really interesting. Wanderer Ziwei laughed heartily when he saw Emotinga's expression. A strange spiritual aura circled around her body. Alright, I'll be honest with you. It's not impossible for me to teach you the art of engineering, but let's talk about it when you fulfill your promise. If I teach you everything you want to know in one go, wouldn't that be boring? Emotinga's expression softened. What Wanderer Ziwei said was reasonable. He should teach her whatever she wanted to learn. How could there be such a cheap deal? Right. Wanderer Ziwei changed the topic. Those puppets just now. You were the one who took them, right? Yes. Emotinga answered honestly. She then asked cautiously, does Senior want to take them back? Oh, it's hard for me without the puppets. How about this? You keep 4 puppets and take 2 with you. In exchange, I'll fix them and tell you how to control them. What do you think? Emotinga was overjoyed. Senior's words are worth 9 sacred tripods? Wanderer Ziwei humphed coldly. Why would I deceive a foundation-building junior like you? That's degrading. The more talented a person was, the more arrogant they were. Emotinga held back her words and took out the 6 stone sculptures one by one. Fortunately, she put them into her Qianquan bag right after she killed them. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to get such a bargain. Taoist Fangjing's eyes reddened when he heard their conversation. He gave up on the stone sculptures because they couldn't be used anymore after they were destroyed, so he could only exchange them for spirit stones. He didn't expect the master of this place would come out and put forward such a condition. If he had known earlier, how could he have given them up? These were puppets in the late stage of the foundation building realm. If he could control them, his strength would increase exponentially. No matter how he thought about it, he could only blame his bad luck. Alas, Senior. While the spiritual aura was fixing the puppets, Taoist Fangjing asked respectfully, May I ask Senior if we can take the treasures on the Bewitching Moonstone's passage outside? If you have the ability, you can take them yourself. Taoist Fangjing was silent. He said that because he hoped this senior would tell them the method to crack the Bewitching Moonstones. But the answer? Don't even think about the things on that passage. Don't underestimate that passage. Those Bewitching Moonstones are also a formation. If you take those things, the formation will be activated immediately. At that time, the entire Immortal's Cave will turn into a killing formation. Spiritual aura rushed out of the stone sculpture puppet's ears. With several gotcha sounds, several puppets stood up one by one. They held their swords in their hands, and their momentum immediately surged. After fixing the puppets, Wanderer Ziwei said, "That's enough. They're not good things anyway. So why do you feel pity? Little girl, I'll teach you the method to control these puppets now." Right after she said that, Emo Tienga felt a sudden pain in her head again, and some things appeared in her mind. When Emo Yaoqing taught her the art of Sinu, it was also directly imprinted with her divine sense. However, she was only a mortal at that time. Now she was a foundation-building cultivator, and had specially cultivated her divine sense. But she still had no ability to resist the divine sense left by a nascent soul cultivator. The path of cultivation was still very far away for her. "Since you're done asking, you can take your things and leave the valley." "Senior," Emo Tienga hurriedly said, "you haven't told us about your wife. Xuanji School has long been destroyed, and we don't know what happened back then. Where are we going to find your wife's corpse?" "I've already prepared this question for you," Wanderer Ziwei said lazily. "There's a compartment under the table with several jade slips inside. Each of you can take one of them. All the information is recorded inside. If you still can't find her after you have this, you can consider yourself out of luck." "All right, since we've said what we wanted to say, this venerated one should also rest. Once you've taken your things, use that jade slip to open the exit and leave. Remember, you must come back 200 years later." Right after he finished speaking, the bizarre spiritual aura in the stone room slowly dissipated. Chapter 170. After the spiritual aura dissipated, Wanderer Ziwei also disappeared. He must have used some kind of secret technique to rest, waiting for them to wake him up 200 years later, or for another group of people to enter the cave. The moment the spiritual aura completely dissipated, several things fell from midair and fell into their hands. Emo Tienga took them. One was a jade slip, and the other was a sunstone. Once she took the jade slip, she immersed her divine sense into it, and the words Xuanji Formation Book were immediately imprinted in her mind. Daoist Fangjing was holding a jade bottle. He was opening it to verify its contents, and then he became ecstatic. Obviously, it was the longevity pills Wanderer Ziwei promised. Even if they only had these few things, coming here was already a big gain for them. There was no need to mention the longevity pills. If Daoist Fangjing didn't use them himself and sold them, they would definitely be enough to exchange for dustless pills. Emo Tienga just didn't know what Daoist Fangjing would choose. As for Emo Tienga herself, Daoist Fangjing already told her the value of the sunstone. Although it wasn't as priceless as longevity pills, it would surpass longevity pills if the Xuanji Formation Book was included. Besides, she also obtained 2 late-stage foundation-building puppets. Emo Tienga smiled faintly as she stared at the 2 stone sculpture puppets in front of her. A method to control them emerged in her mind. She made a hand seal, then pointed at the space between her eyebrows, slowly drawing out her divine sense and probing the puppets' ears. These puppets only needed a tiny bit of their master's divine sense to make them recognize them as their master. Only people whose cultivation levels were much higher than theirs could forcibly erase their divine sense. In other words, only cultivators in the core formation realm or higher could erase their divine sense after she made these 2 puppets recognize her as their master. However, there was another method to make them recognize her as their master. If she didn't know, these 2 puppets would only be 2 pieces of trash. When Wanderer Ziwei repaired these puppets, he withdrew his divine sense from them. Now, she only needed to carry out the process of making them recognize her as their master. Her divine sense went into the puppets' ears. With 2 gotcha sounds, the 2 puppets next to her moved their limbs and waved their stone swords. Emo Tienga was overjoyed. She could control them now. However, her divine sense wasn't strong enough, so she couldn't control them like Wanderer Ziwei did. Even though the puppets were asleep, they still had to act on their own. "Fellow Daoist Fangjing, who was on the side, called out after a moment of hesitation. When he heard Emo Tienga telling Wanderer Ziwei about her master, he already knew that the name Yi Xiaotian was indeed fake. Furthermore, she was a disciple of Xianqing School, the second largest cultivation group in the celestial pole. He was an individual cultivator who had been living in the secular world for several hundred years and had seen many arrogant disciples from big cultivation groups. Now that he found out Emotienga's sect, he kept a respectful distance from her. Emotienga didn't know what he was thinking. Even if she knew, she wouldn't care. She only met Taoist Fangjing by chance. Even though he somewhat resembled second uncle, he was still a stranger. After leaving this place, everyone would go their separate ways, and they might never see each other again. Oh, fellow Taoist Fangjing. Upon hearing Taoist Fangjing's voice, Emotienga put away her stone sculpture puppet. In the current cultivation world, if a middle-stage foundation-building cultivator carried 2 late-stage foundation-building puppets with him, she knew how envious it was. It was better not to take them out if there was no need. Taoist Fangjing was already envious, and Wanderer Ziwei also said they couldn't hurt each other, so he could only stop thinking about it. Now, he pointed at the stone table and said politely to Emotienga, "Since we're done here, let's divide these things." Wanderer Ziwei already said they could divide the things on the stone table. Emotienga answered, "All right." Taoist Fangjing, however, didn't move. He looked at Emotienga rather nervously. "Fellow Taoist Yi, before this, you promised me I'd pick first. Does that still count?" Although Emotienga's skills surpassed cultivators in the same realm as her, Taoist Fangjing felt he wasn't much worse than her in fights of magical power. However, she just obtained 2 late-stage foundation-building puppets. If she went back on her word, Taoist Fangjing knew he wouldn't be able to defeat her no matter what, so he could only accept it. Emotienga chuckled. "Of course it counts. Fellow Taoist, you pick first. There are 5 things here. You take 3 and I take 2. What do you think?" Taoist Fangjing was overjoyed. He cupped his hands towards her, then walked towards the stone table, slowly picking up the treasures. Emotienga shook her head, then slowly studied the Xuanji formation book on the side. She wasn't a cultivator born in Kunwu, so she couldn't learn to go back on her word for benefits. Her mother was an ordinary and kind-hearted mortal woman who taught her loyalty, filial piety, benevolence, and righteousness since she was a child. After she arrived in Kunwu, she learned how to survive in the cultivation world from second uncle and learned to plan for herself. But she didn't want to become the kind of person her mother didn't like. Besides, she wasn't a short-sighted cultivator. In the core formation realm, and even the nascent soul realm, she would encounter inner demons. If she did evil recklessly, she would only be shackled. At that time, she would be plagued by inner demons and be unable to make a realm breakthrough. It would be too late even if she cried. "Fellow Taoist Yi, I've chosen. Take a look," Taoist Fangjing said happily. Emotienga withdrew her divine sense, then walked towards the table. There were several things on the table: a bell, a pair of boots, a bottle of medicinal pills, an unknown ore, and a spiritual plant inside a jade box. Both the bell and the boots were magic weapons. Moreover, their grades were obviously extraordinary. They were indeed the collection of a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator. However, the boots were extremely short and were embroidered with orchids. They were actually women's boots. In addition, she also recognized that the spiritual plant was reviving grass. When they escaped from Mount Yunwu, second uncle was seriously injured. She once saw Qin Shi take this thing out and temporarily suppress second uncle's injuries. This kind of spiritual plant was said to have the effect of bringing the dead back to life when it was refined into medicinal pills. Even if it wasn't refined into medicinal pills, its healing effect would still be extraordinary. She didn't recognize the ore, and she didn't open the medicinal pills either. However, since they were placed together with these things, they must be treasures. Taoist Fangjing chose 3 things: the bell, the spiritual plant, and the medicinal pill. When he saw Emotienga's expression, he added, "Fellow Taoist Yi, if there's anything you want, let's discuss it." Emotienga didn't say anything, and just shook her head. Since she didn't have any objections, Taoist Fangjing put the boots and the ore away, and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Among the 3 things he chose, the bell was an active attack magic weapon, while the boots were passive magic weapons. Active magic weapons were a bit more precious than passive ones. But the boots were women's, so he couldn't do anything about it. For cultivators, spiritual plants and medicinal pills were more important than ores, so he was a bit worried he might have gone too far by taking all the good things. In fact, this was just right for Emotienga. She didn't lack medicinal pills or spiritual plants. Although there was no resurrection grass in her virtual sky world, it wasn't like there weren't any spiritual plants that were better than it, and they were a lot older. Since she had medicinal pills, she naturally wouldn't lack magic weapons. Choosing these two things would be a loss for her. As for magic weapons, the shuttle of flying Apsara was a top-grade magic tool. She was very used to it, so she didn't need to change it for the time being. Once she formed her gold core, she would start refining her natal magic weapon. For her, attack magic weapons were just icing on the cake. Besides, these boots weren't bad either. Based on the abundant spiritual aura on them, and the fact that they were placed here by Wanderer Ziwei, they were undoubtedly high-grade magic weapons. She picked up the boots and looked at them. She discovered the words "cloud treading boots" were embroidered on the heel. Cloud treading. Presumably, it could increase the speed of flying? Fellow Taoist Yi, there's also this. Taoist Fangjin crouched down, took out 2 jade slips from a secret compartment under the table, and handed one to her. Emotienga swept her gaze over it, and found several identical jade slips inside. Presumably, Wanderer Ziwei also prepared them before he passed away, but she didn't know how many of them he had. Soon after, the two of them returned their things to their respective places, then started to study the jade slips, looking for a way out. According to the jade slips, there was a transporting formation inside this stone room, which could directly transport people out. Emotienga remembered Shang Ruan was still on the stone platform outside the illusory formation, so she wondered whether she should take her away or not. However, after reading the entire jade slip, she still couldn't find a way to open the stone door from the inside. In the end, she had no choice but to give up. Although she found Shang Ruan pleasing to the eye, it wasn't worth breaking into the Immortal's cave for her. She hoped Shang Ruan would be lucky and wake up on her own. With her temperament, she would definitely be able to pass this test and escape this calamity. Once everything was settled, Emotienga and Taoist Fangjin followed the instructions in the jade slips. They opened the transporting formation and inserted the spirit stones into it. The transporting formation then emitted rays of light, and the scenery around them changed. The rays of light dissipated. Emotienga opened her eyes, then turned to look at her surroundings, feeling puzzled. The cold wind whistled past her ears, the towering glacier in front of her, and heavy snow swirling above their heads. They were standing on a piece of glacier which stretched as far as the eye could see, but they didn't know where they were. Taoist Fangjin, who was next to her, was startled. "Oh," Emotienga hastily asked. "Fellow Taoist Fangjin, do you recognize this place?" Taoist Fangjin nodded, then looked at her and said, "This is the northernmost glacier." The northernmost glacier. When Emotienga heard what he said, she was also gobsmacked. The Celestial Pole's terrain consisted of the towering Kunwa mountain range in the east and southeast, the Devil's Path, which was separated from Tiandao sect by a mountain in the northeast, the uninhabited desert in the west, and the northernmost glacier. Wanderer Ziwei's Immortal's Cave was in the Wind Breath Valley of Mount Jiuling in Jin Country. It was located in the central region, so it was more than 10,000 miles away from here. This transporting formation actually sent them so far away. Emotienga took out the jade slip, but she discovered that the destination of the transporting formation wasn't written on it. Could it be that they were transported randomly? She wouldn't be able to get an answer to this question unless she completed Wanderer Ziwei's task and returned to the Wind Breath Valley. The two of them were standing on top of the glacier, braving the cold wind and heavy snow, but they actually felt a bit cold. Once cultivators built their foundation, they wouldn't be affected by heat or cold. This cold wind could actually make 2 middle-stage foundation building cultivators like them feel cold, so it obviously wasn't an ordinary cold wind. Emotienga clasped her palms together, then moved her spiritual aura to expel the coldness from her body. She then turned towards Taoist Fangjin and asked, fellow Taoist Fangjing. Since you're here, what's your plan? Taoist Fangjing muttered to himself for a moment then answered. I originally planned to return to Kunwu. I was just passing through the secular world to look for some special spiritual plants and spiritual panaceas. Since there's nothing else here, I'd better go back first. He paused for a moment then asked Emotienga, what about fellow Taoist Yi? What do you think about this matter? Emotienga said faintly, with our current abilities, this matter is still a bit difficult. Not to mention the fact that the message Senior Ziwei left behind was from 5,000 years ago, so it's hard to find it now. Moreover, Senior Zhao's burial place must have been very dangerous. If she passed away in a sitting posture in her cultivation group, Xuanji School is proficient in the Tao of formations, so the burial place of a nascent soul cultivator must have been filled with traps. If she ran into danger outside, it'd be even more terrible. If even a nascent soul cultivator ran into danger, wouldn't we be courting death if we went? Besides, whether we can find her or not is still a problem. Taoist Fangjing was silent for a long time. I also think so. Fellow Taoist Yi, does that mean you don't plan to look for her now? I'll take my time looking for her and confirm the information first. What she said made Taoist Fangjing look envious. Fellow Taoist Yi, you're an outstanding disciple of a famous cultivation group. If you want to look for something, it'll be much more convenient for you than for an individual cultivator like me. Emotienga just smiled but didn't say anything. She had a bit of an advantage in this matter. Taoist Fangjing might have wanted to cooperate with her in the beginning, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. After all, she was in a big cultivation group, so it would be much easier for her to look for things. She could also easily find companions with high cultivation levels. She wasn't like him, who had to painstakingly look for things on his own. Even if he found something, it would be difficult for him to find someone to take risks with him. Since he could do it alone, why should he share the fruits of his labor with others? Because of that, Taoist Fangjing swallowed his words and thought optimistically. Even if he didn't do anything, he wouldn't lose anything. This was also the reason why Emotienga didn't invite him. She obviously had a very high chance of obtaining everything, so why should she share it with others? Although she wasn't a profit seeker, she also wouldn't be benevolent enough to share things that were already in her mouth with others. The two of them had a tacit understanding, so they didn't continue talking about this matter. Instead, they changed the topic to the matter at hand. Does fellow Taoist Fangjing want to leave this place immediately and return to Kunwu? What about fellow Taoist Yi? I'm not in a hurry to go back. Taking a stroll around is also good. Upon hearing what Emotienga said, Taoist Fangjing guessed she must be a disciple of a famous cultivation group who came out to gain experience. The two of them stared at the boundless glacier and snow then said together, "Then we'll take our leave first." At this point, they smiled at each other then Emotienga cupped her hands. That being the case, fellow Taoist Fangjing, I'll take my leave now. Taoist Fangjing returned her greeting then said, I'll go straight south. Fellow Taoist Yi, Zhengfa sect isn't far from here, so you can go a bit further north. Emotienga nodded. Thank you. The two of them waved goodbye, and no longer said anything. One of them went south while the other went north. Amidst the snowstorm, Emotienga muttered to herself for a moment before she rode the white silk handkerchief and flew north. Among the 7 great cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole, Zhengfa sect was the only one that wasn't in Kunwu. It was located in the northernmost glacial area, and specialized in accepting cultivators with water spiritual roots to practice ice spells. For some unknown reason, the residents of this area generally had water spiritual roots, so Zhengfa sect dominated the north, and was unexpectedly able to contend against several great cultivation groups in Kunwu. However, due to this special geographical location, Zhengfa sect was both successful and failed here. The glaciers were bitter and cold, so there weren't many mortals in the north. Mortals were the foundation of cultivators, so Zhengfa sect couldn't expand further, and could only set up a branch in Kunwu. Nevertheless, the northernmost glacial area was the most advantageous for those who practiced ice spells, so their headquarters could only be located there. All these reasons led to a certain phenomenon. No one in the cultivation world in the entire celestial pole dared to look down on Zhengfa sect. But no one was optimistic about its future, because its advantages and weaknesses were tied together. It couldn't grow stronger, but it also couldn't be easily destroyed. Since she ended up in the northernmost glacial area by chance, Emotienga thought she might as well widen her horizons here. Since Zhengfa sect was able to become one of the 7 great cultivation groups in the celestial pole, with only one type of cultivation technique, it was clear that Zhengfa sect must have its unique characteristics. It would be beneficial for her to understand more about it. In the current cultivation world, aside from devil cultivators, the so-called sword cultivators, talisman cultivators, martial arts cultivators, and medical cultivators were all Dao cultivators. The Dao was broad and profound. Aside from watching, listening, thinking, discussing, and gaining experience, there was no other way to improve it. Therefore, a person could only enter closed-door meditation after their mental state reached a certain level. But they couldn't delude themselves into closed-door meditation to cultivate from the aura refining realm all the way to the nascent soul realm. Cultivation was never just cultivation. The further north she flew, the greater the pressure of the cold wind. After flying for half a day, Emotienga actually felt her whole body stiffen. She was bewildered. She was already in the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm, but she still couldn't withstand this cold wind. What about the low-level cultivators of Zhengfa sect? Could it be that they didn't leave the sect? Or was it because she didn't know the secret? Unable to figure out the reason, Emotienga shook her head. She then found a crack between the icebergs and hid inside. This was a narrow crack between 2 icebergs. Fortunately, she was small, so she could squeeze in. Finally, the cold wind stopped, and Emotienga felt her body warm up. The ice here and the low temperature didn't affect her at all. Only the cold wind blew on her body like a cultivator's spell. Emotienga felt a bit regretful that she didn't ask Taoist Fangjing about this. Since he'd been here before, he should know what was going on with this cold wind. She sat cross-legged in the crack between the icebergs and operated her spiritual aura. After one small circulation, Emotienga already felt her whole body warm. Maybe I have to keep operating my spiritual aura? With that thought in mind, she stood up, preparing to continue flying. However, it was only when she stood up that she realized her boots were wet. Before she left, she deliberately made 2 sets of robes that weren't Xianqing School's uniform, but they were made of the same raw materials. After being calcined with innate true fire, they could be considered spirit tools, so they weren't affected by this cold wind at all. However, she didn't remember to make the boots. It was only after she left that she realized the boots had Xianqing School's Taiji auspicious cloud symbol on them. Because of that, when she was in Yi Clan, she casually asked for a pair of boots and wore them. Just as she was about to take out the new boots and put them on, Emotienga paused. Didn't I just get a pair of boots from Ziwei's Immortal's Cave? After thinking for a moment, she took out the cloud-treading boots and put them on. The moment she put on the cloud-treading boots, Emotienga felt as if the boots were measuring the size of her feet. Soon after, the boots automatically changed and tightly fitted her feet. Soon after, a wisp of spiritual aura came out of the boots and concentrated on her feet. When she stepped on them with the new boots, she felt the soles of her feet flying. A thought flashed through her mind. Without using the white silk handkerchief, she soared into the air. In an instant, she had already flown several hundred feet. Upon discovering this, Emotienga was pleasantly surprised. She originally guessed these boots could increase her flying speed, but unexpectedly, they were actually a flying magic weapon. In this case, she wouldn't need to use the white silk handkerchief to fly in the future. Although the white silk handkerchief also had a flying function, Zhong Muling clearly said it was originally a defensive magic weapon. Its flying function was something he modified later, so it was slightly inferior to a flying magic weapon. Of course, that was only in his eyes as a deification cultivator. Compared to core formation cultivators, and even nascent soul cultivators, the white silk handkerchief's flying speed couldn't be considered bad. As for these cloud-treading boots, They were a magic weapon for peak stage nascent soul cultivators, and were also a flying magic weapon. Presumably, they shouldn't be inferior to the white silk handkerchief. In the past, she had to use the white silk handkerchief to both fly and defend, so sometimes she would be flustered. With these boots, wouldn't it be more convenient for her to fight? With this thought in mind, Emotienga's interest was piqued. She immediately urged the cloud-treading boots with all her strength and flew forward. At this moment, if someone was watching from below, they would see a white flight light flying in the sky. Although its momentum wasn't very strong, its speed was far faster than a foundation-building cultivator's. It was almost comparable to a core formation cultivator's. Chapter 171. As she flew through the wind and snow, she used her spiritual aura. Sure enough, she didn't feel cold anymore. Emotienga thought to herself. In that case, the cultivators in the northernmost glacier had to use their spiritual aura all the time. From a certain point of view, didn't that mean they had more time to cultivate than ordinary cultivators? But that wasn't right. Aura refining cultivators couldn't resist this cold wind. They must have some secret method. While she was thinking, her spread-out divine sense suddenly found traces of living beings. Emotienga stopped, changed her direction, and flew northwest. Her divine sense locked on. Before long, she saw a group of people walking on the glacier. They were mortals. She frowned, waved her sleeves and descended. The power emitted by a foundation-building cultivator shocked these mortals. When they saw her appearance, they all kowtowed and said, "Greetings, Master Immortal. Greetings, Master Immortal." While these mortals were kowtowing, Emotienga landed on the ice and said, "Who are you?" Among these mortals, the one kneeling in front was a bearded middle-aged man. He raised his head and respectfully said, "So it's a fairy. We have eyes but failed to see. Please forgive us." His attitude was humble. Emotienga couldn't help but frown. "No need. Stand up and answer me." "Yes, yes." The man answered repeatedly. He then stood up and shouted at the people behind him, "Fairy, let us stand up. Stand up, stand up." These mortals stood up in twos and threes. Emotienga noticed they were all young and strong men. There were also a few women who looked quite strong. "Fairy, we're from the seal tribe. This is the snow lotus we picked this time. Please examine it." As he spoke, he took out a jade box from his robe, opened it, and offered it to her with both hands. Emotienga was stunned. This jade box was used by cultivators to collect spiritual plants. The snow lotus inside was a spiritual plant. What were they doing? "Did you mistake me for someone else?" Seeing that she didn't accept the jade box, the man looked at her carefully and suddenly understood. "Fairy, you came from the south?" "Yes." Emotienga looked at the man and frowned. "What do you mean?" The man said with a simple and honest smile. "Fairy is from the south. No wonder you don't know our northernmost customs. We are lotus pickers. When the immortal masters of the extreme north meet us lotus pickers, they will use spirit stones to exchange for snow lotuses, so that's how it is." This northernmost land was indeed very different from Kunwu. Emotienga remembered what she wanted to ask. "You're mortals. How can you withstand the cold wind and snow? This snowstorm is not normal." "Ah, Fairy doesn't know?" The man was surprised. Could it be that Fairy didn't come from Dan City? Dan City? Emotienga paused for a moment. She recalled the Jade Slippy clan, gave her saying that regardless of whether one was a cultivator or a mortal, they would have to pass through Dawn City on their way to the northernmost land. Dawn City was the last big city on the way to the northernmost land in the Heartland. If one wanted to get supplies or inquire about information, it would be very convenient, so Dawn City became the only way. If Fairy came from Dawn City, someone should have already told you about our northernmost land when you were getting supplies. Emotienga said faintly, "I came directly from the Heartland to the northernmost land, so I didn't pass through Dawn City. Why don't you tell me about it? If you tell me in detail, I'll naturally reward you." Upon hearing her last sentence, the man smiled so widely that his eyes bloomed. He said repeatedly, "Yes, yes, this lowly one will tell Fairy." As it turned out, the mortals in the northernmost land were different from those in the Heartland and Kunwu. They didn't have a country, nor did they have a city. They were only divided into tribes. Each tribe was different in size. The largest tribe had tens of thousands of people, while the small ones only had a few dozen people. On the snowfield stretching thousands of miles in the northernmost land, there were several thousand tribes of various sizes. Their combined population was enough to be mentioned in the same breath as that of the big country in the Heartland. However, these tribes weren't all friendly. Some of them married each other, while some of them hated each other. Before Zhengfa sect was established, each of these tribes had their own cultivators, and they were called shamans. Shamans were often the leaders of tribes. If a tribe didn't have a shaman, it had to pay tribute to a tribe that had one. Shamans were the gods of the tribes in the northernmost land. These shamans, on the other hand, were actually just some low-level cultivators. Even the shamans of big tribes were only in the foundation-building realm. This was what Mo Tiange deduced from the man's words. When the cultivators from Kunwu established Zhengfa sect in the northernmost land, they subdued the shamans of big tribes and ordered all the shamans in the tribes to belong to Zhengfa sect. In return, Zhengfa sect would protect their tribes. In the beginning, the tribes in the northernmost land weren't convinced, because they thought Zhengfa sect had broken their tradition. However, as Zhengfa sect used a series of methods, the tribes discovered that their lives became much better with Zhengfa sect's protection. Gradually, they were convinced, and Zhengfa sect became their new god. Several thousand years passed, and Zhengfa sect took root firmly in the northernmost land. Because of this, the tribes there abandoned their traditions. They no longer called themselves shamans. Instead, they followed the way people in the Middle Earth and Kunwu called them immortals or fairies. Their former shamans wore Taoist robes and combed their hair into Taoist buns. Even their unique language was no longer their main language. Instead, they spoke like the people in the Middle Earth and Kunwu. Even their way of life was different from how it was several thousand years ago. The former tribes made a living by hunting fish and wild beasts under the glaciers. It was a very difficult life, and it was easy for them to lose their lives. After Zhengfa sect appeared, all the tribes under their protection would receive a kind of spirit tool that could help them hunt beasts. However, this kind of spirit tool required spirit stones to activate, so they organized lotus picking teams. They would go to the boundless snowfield to pick snow lotuses and exchange them for spirit stones with cultivators. Although picking snow lotuses was also very difficult, it was much less dangerous than hunting beasts. Because of Zhengfa sect's formidable strength, the mortals of the northernmost land respected cultivators very much. Whenever cultivators passed by, they would warmly welcome them and point them in the right direction. If they were lucky, they could even get a few spirit stones as a reward. The group of people Mo Tiange ran into was a lotus picking team from a nearby tribe called Seal. They thought she was a cultivator from Zhengfa sect, so they offered snow lotuses to her. Mo Tiange nodded, then asked, "The cold wind here is also very difficult for cultivators to resist. You're mortals, so why aren't you affected?" The man in the lead explained, "Fairy, you might not know this, but this is the effect of snow lotuses. Every year, we northernmost people use soup made from snow lotuses to wash our bodies. This way, we won't have to worry about the cold wind." Oh, Mo Tiange stared at the snow lotuses in the jade box. Her interest was piqued. Although these spiritual plants aren't old, they're full of spiritual aura. The cultivators here are actually willing to let mortals like you use them? Fairy, there are a lot of ordinary snow lotuses in our northernmost land, so they're not that precious. However, the snow lotuses they offer to the Masters Immortals are all rare species, and not easy to find. Oh, I see, Fairy. Once the man finished speaking, he raised his head and looked at Mo Tiange eagerly. I wonder if you're interested in this snow lotus? Mo Tiange was bewildered. Aren't you going to offer it to Zhengfa sect cultivators? Can you also give it to outsiders? The man smiled respectfully and said, Fairy, you might not know this, but Zhengfa sect doesn't restrict us from offering snow lotuses. If cultivators from the south come, we can also exchange them for spirit stones. I heard from a master immortal in my tribe that this snow lotus can be concocted into a kind of medicinal pill that's only effective for people who practice water magic. So cultivators from the south won't come to steal it. At most, they'll exchange some for their own use. This won't affect Jingfa sect at all. No wonder Jingfa sect dominated this area. Their unique spiritual roots and magic were the foundation of their establishment. They not only deterred mortals, but also bestowed kindness upon them. They didn't treat them harshly, so after a long time, mortals would naturally sincerely revere them as gods. With this thought in mind, Emotienga reached out to take the snow lotus from the jade box. After studying it for a while, she asked, "How many spirit stones do you want to exchange this snow lotus for?" Upon hearing her question, the man hastily bowed. "Master Immortal, however much you're willing to give, it's a reward for us." Emotienga couldn't help but smile when she heard that. Everyone loved to be respectful and flatter, so even if his words weren't sincere, they still made her feel comfortable. Besides, this man looked sincere, so he didn't seem fake. Jingfa sect was really amazing in this northernmost area. They could actually make these mortals sincerely respect and love cultivators. Emotienga took out a handful of spirit stones from her Qianquan bag and gave them to the man. "Consider this extra your reward for answering my question." This snow lotus was about a dozen years old, so it wasn't considered precious to cultivators. She roughly estimated the price of spiritual plants in Kunwu and estimated it to be worth about 10 spirit stones. The man looked at the dozen or so colorful spirit stones and was pleasantly surprised. He smiled so widely that his eyes disappeared. He nodded repeatedly and said, "Thank you, fairy, for your reward." As he spoke, the group of about a dozen people once again knelt down and kowtowed. Emotienga waved her sleeves, sending out a spiritual aura to support them. She couldn't stand these people kneeling at the drop of a hat. "You said this snow lotus can withstand the cold wind by boiling it into soup and washing your body? Are the cultivators of Jingfa sect also like this?" After receiving her spirit stones, the man's attitude became even more respectful. He bowed and answered, "We mortals are like this. However, according to the master immortal of my tribe, Jingfa sect has another method suitable for cultivators. Not only can it withstand the cold wind, but it can also increase spiritual aura." Oh, Emotienga was a bit tempted. Is this method allowed to be taught to outsiders? This lowly one doesn't know. The man then hastily added, "If fairy doesn't have any urgent matters to attend to, you can come to our tribe as a guest. Our master immortal happened to come back a few days ago." Emotienga thought about it. In any case, she didn't have any specific purpose, so it wouldn't matter if she went to this tribe to take a look. It would be even better if she could learn more about the northernmost area from their master immortal. With that thought in mind, she nodded with a smile. "That being the case, I'll be bothering you." Upon hearing her agreeing, the man was pleasantly surprised. He hastily returned her greeting respectfully. We don't dare. It's our honor to have fairy as a guest in our tribe. Fairy, please." Emotienga looked at the snowstorm and said, "I'll send you on your way." As she spoke, she raised her hand and summoned the white silk handkerchief. She then cast an art, and the white silk handkerchief instantly expanded. With a flick of her sleeve, spiritual aura gushed out, lifting more than 10 mortals up. Seemingly seeing such a method for the first time, the man in the lead was both surprised and delighted. Standing on the white silk handkerchief, he said while trembling, "Fairy, this." "What? You don't want to?" The man hastily shook his head. "Of course not. With fairy taking us back, we'll be much safer. Thank you, fairy." As he spoke, he was about to kneel again. Emotienga felt helpless. These people were too respectful to cultivators. They knelt at every turn. She raised her hand to stop them. "Stand properly. You'll lead the way." Yes. Fairy, our tribe is in this direction." The seal tribe wasn't far away. Since she was carrying mortals, Emotienga didn't dare to fly too fast. Nevertheless, in just a short while, they could already see the densely packed snow-white roofs below them. As it turned out, in this northernmost area, materials were scarce except for ice, so these mortals used ice to build their houses. The temperature in this northernmost area was extremely low, Even a drop of water would turn into ice, so the houses built from ice were airtight. Not only were they not cold, but they were also very warm. Emotienga learned all of this from the man in the lead. The man in the lead was the chieftain of the Seal tribe, Haibo. The northernmost people originally didn't have surnames, but after Zhengfa sect was established, they also started to use surnames. Everyone in the Seal tribe had the surname Hai. Looking down from above, the large group of ice houses were sparkling and translucent. Amidst the swirling snow, they looked very beautiful. Ferry over there. Haibo pointed the way, and Emotienga landed on the open space in the middle of the group of ice houses. There were originally many people on the open space, and each of them was busy with their own business. The women were sewing and drying clothes, while the men were repairing all kinds of utensils and dealing with the carcasses of various animals. Upon seeing them coming down from the sky, everyone gathered around them. Once they landed on the open space and put away the white silk handkerchief, Emotienga discovered that a group of people was kneeling around her. Feeling helpless, she turned to Haibo and said, "I don't like this. Tell them to stop kneeling." Haibo nodded, then stepped forward and said loudly, "Everyone get up. This fairy doesn't like people kneeling. Go do what you're supposed to do." Upon hearing the chieftain's words, these people finally stood up one after another. Some went back to work, while others came to talk to their relatives. Haibo turned around and said to Emotienga, "Fairy, this way please. Our master immortal is here." Emotienga nodded, then followed Haibo to the tallest ice house. As they walked, Haibo introduced the place to her. "Our tribe's master immortal is an official disciple of Zhengfa sect. If you have any questions, he'll definitely know. Come fairy please." He lifted the animal skin curtain in front of the ice house and politely invited Emotienga to enter. Emotienga smiled and took the lead. When she was above the tribe, she already sensed a foundation-building cultivator's aura. Unexpectedly, there was actually a foundation-building cultivator in this tribe that only had several hundred people at most. Inside was a small hall. The furnishings weren't any different from those in the Heartland in Kunwu. The only difference was the materials. Most of the furniture was made of ice. The curtains were made of animal skin, and there were also some teacups and the like, all of which were carved from wood. Once they entered the small hall, Haibo stood in front of a curtain and shouted, "Master Immortal, Haibo requests an audience." Then he respectfully stood in front of the curtain. After a while, a voice came from inside. "What's the matter?" Haibo respectfully reported, "A fairy requests an audience." Once Haibo finished speaking, Emotienga slightly released the momentum of a foundation-building cultivator. Sure enough, a sound was immediately heard from inside. Soon after, someone lifted the curtain and came out. It was a young man. He was tall and thin, had a thin face, and was wearing Zhengfa sect's Taoist robe. Emotienga raised her hand. Just as she was about to salute him, she was startled. "It's you." Chapter 172. This person was Jiang Shanghang, the person she saw on Mount Yunwu more than 10 years ago. The Jiang Shanghang in front of her was a lot different from 10 years ago. When Emotienga first entered Yunwu sect, the Jiang Shanghang she saw was young and had a decent face, but his whole body was cold, and his eyes were full of disdain, making people not want to get close to him. But the current Jiang Shanghang looked a bit younger than before. He wasn't even 50 years old yet, which was quite young for a foundation-building cultivator. His entire person was much thinner than before, but the uncomfortable gloomy coldness of his body had turned into indifference. His brows had also become gentle, and there was no disdain to hurt others, only a faint indifference. After Emotienga was saved by Jiang Shanghang, the two of them fled separately. Emotienga attracted the attention of the pursuers, so no one knew Jiang Shanghang was involved, and he disappeared smoothly. Later, although Emotienga was saved by Qin Shi, she lost second uncle and went to Xianxing school. Separated by thousands of miles, she didn't have time to inquire about Jiang Shanghang. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years had passed. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang? Jiang Shanghang was even more shocked when he saw her expression. When he heard her voice, he regained his composure and said to the curious Haibo, This is my friend. Quickly serve the snow lotus tea. Haibo promptly answered, Yes, yes. Please wait a moment, the tea will be served soon. After Haibo left, Jiang Shanghang's gaze finally fell on Emotienga. After sizing her up, the astonishment on his face slowly faded, and he finally smiled. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, long time no see. His smile made Emotienga sigh inwardly. How could Jiang Shanghang smile in the past? It seemed that leaving Yunwu sect for more than 10 years had changed him a lot. It has indeed been a long time. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 years have passed. I didn't expect we'd meet again here. Jiang Shanghang nodded with a smile. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, please sit. Oh, should I change my name now? Emotienga sat down on the guest seat and said with a smile. What's the difference? I'm still using the name Yi Xiaotian when I'm outside, so Senior Marshal Brother Jiang can still call me that. After a pause, she asked with a smile. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, are you using your original name now? Jiang Shanghang sat down on the seat of honor and shook his head. My current name is Jiang Shuihan. Upon hearing that he really did change his name, Emotienga sighed and nodded. Jiang Shanghang probably changed his name because he had no other choice. When he left Jiang clan, he broke off all relations with Jiang clan. Before he left, he even killed the beloved junior of Jiang clan's core formation cultivator. He wasn't like Emotienga, who entered Xianqing school and had protection. If he didn't change his name, it would be very easy for others to find him. It's been so many years. Is Senior Brother Jiang doing well? Why did you become a master immortal of this northernmost tribe, and even enter Jingfa sect? I'm doing pretty well, Jiang Shanghang said faintly. After I left Mount Yunwu, I decided to leave Kunwu and look for other spirit veins to cultivate. However, there are too few spirit veins in the secular world. In the end, after thinking about it for a long time, I came to the northernmost area. Zhengfa sect is the most powerful sect in the northernmost area, and it also cultivates water magic, which suits me very well. Kunwu is also far away from here, so presumably, no matter how hard Jiang clan tries, they won't be able to find me in the northernmost area. That is true. In the past, Senior Brother Jiang also cultivated water magic, so entering Zhengfa sect also complemented each other. Emotienga couldn't help but nod. Now that she thought about it carefully, it was very normal for Jiang Shanghang to come to the northernmost area. He mainly cultivated water magic, so Zhengfa sect's cultivation technique was very suitable for him. Furthermore, it was far from Kunwu, so it was a good place to hide. Jiang Shanghang smiled. It was actually a coincidence that I was able to smoothly enter Zhengfa sect. As long as a mortal in the northernmost area has spiritual roots, Zhengfa sect will accept them no matter what kind of spiritual roots they have. However, they're very strict with us cultivators who come from the south. My spiritual roots are too poor, so it was originally very difficult for me to be accepted by them. Oh, could it be that Senior Brother Jiang encountered some kind of fated chance? It was also a coincidence. As soon as I arrived here, I happened to run into the people of this tribe. Their master immortal had just passed away, so they were faced with the predicament of being incorporated by another tribe. Thus they begged me to become their master immortal. I thought about it, and since I didn't have anywhere else to go, I agreed. Later, Zhengfa sect changed its name and abandoned the original Zhengfa school. To celebrate the change, foreign cultivators like me, who also became a master immortal of a tribe, were allowed to join as an exception. I see. That being the case, Jiang Shanghang had it much harder than she had in the past 17 years. After painstakingly escaping from Yunwu sect, leaving Kunwu and fleeing to the northernmost area, he must have suffered a lot in the beginning, but fortunately, he finally had some results. Jiang Shanghang stared at her and asked, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, judging from your appearance, you've been living well these past few years. I originally thought it would be good if you could build your foundation, but when I saw you again, your cultivation level was actually much higher than mine. You must have had some kind of fated chance, right? His own cultivation level was still in the early stage of the foundation building realm. Even if he wanted to advance to the middle stage of the foundation building realm, it wouldn't be something that could be done in a short period of time. Mo Tiange, on the other hand, was already in the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm, and could advance to the late stage at any time. Mo Tiange also smiled. Jiang Shanghang's current temperament was quite agreeable to her. He spoke bluntly, and wasn't as gloomy as before. It's not bad. I was just lucky. I'm afraid luck alone isn't enough. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you don't have to be so modest. Jiang Shanghang paused for a moment then continued. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I'll tell you the truth. When we parted that year, I thought you'd most likely be unable to escape the calamity. I never expected that you. How did you escape that time? This, Mo Tiange muttered to herself for a moment, but in the end, she told him the truth. It was almost like that. If Senior Marshal Brother Qin hadn't come to save me, I would have died. Senior Marshal Brother Qin? Jiang Shanghang thought for a moment then said with astonishment. Are you talking about Junior Marshal Brother Qin, she who lived with us? Mo Tiange nodded. After we parted that day, second uncle and I escaped from Mount Yunwu, but we were quickly overtaken by them. Because of that, second uncle died. Mo Tiange's expression became gloomy when she mentioned this matter. Jiang Shanghang looked apologetic. I'm sorry. I made you remember something sad. It's nothing. Judging from Jiang Shanghang's current appearance, he was indeed completely different from before. How could he have apologized for this matter in the past? She went on to say, before second uncle died, he told me to ask someone for help. That person was a famous core formation cultivator in West Kunwu. Back then, he owed my father a favor, so he left a divine sense sound-transmitting talisman behind. After I crushed the talisman, Senior Marshal Brother Qin appeared. What? Jiang Shanghang was shocked. He thought for a moment then asked, Junior Marshal Brother Qin, could it be that you already have a master? Mo Tiange smiled and nodded. She knew Jiang Shanghang misunderstood, but she didn't intend to explain. In fact, she also thought the same as Jiang Shanghang back then. She also made her think the same. After all, how could an ordinary aura refining cultivator know that he lived with a core formation cultivator for several years? Jiang Shanghang thought for a moment then asked, could it be that Junior Marshal Brother Qin's master is much more famous than Yunwu Sek's? So he could. Correct. Mo Tiange said faintly. How could those people from Yunwu Sect dare to offend the disciple of Lord Daoist Jinghe from Xianqing School in West Kunwu? What? Jiang Shanghang blurted out, and stood up all of a sudden. Right at that moment, someone called from outside. Master Immortal, the Snow Lotus tea is here. Jiang Shanghang calmed himself down then sat down. His tone regained its calmness. Come in. A woman lifted the curtain then gracefully walked in with a tray. She poured each of them a cup of tea, and cautiously looked between them, as if she was trying to guess their relationship. Finally, she saluted them then left. The women of this northernmost area were also different from the women of Kunwu in the heartland. Their skin was fair, and their facial features were relatively deep. Their statures weren't tall, but they were sturdy. The women Mo Tiange saw on the way to this tribe were all like this, but this woman was obviously a bit more beautiful. Her figure was much more graceful, and she didn't look like someone from the northernmost area. Jiang Shanghang, who noticed her gaze, explained, ever since Zhengfa sect established itself in the northernmost area, the mortals it brought with it had many marriages with the northernmost tribes. Now some people in the tribe have bloodlines from the heartland in Kunwu. He then pointed at the Snow Lotus tea on the table. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, have you ever drunk this Snow Lotus tea in Dawn City? Back then, I was in a hurry to come to the northernmost area, so I didn't drink this Snow Lotus tea, and suffered a lot. Fortunately, I met people from the Seal tribe. Mo Tiange shook her head and said with a smile, I didn't either. Fortunately, I've built my foundation now. Otherwise, I would have also suffered a lot. Jiang Shanghang smiled, and the two of them sipped their tea. This Snow Lotus tea was the same as the one in the south. It was dried and brewed, but instead of tea leaves, it was made from snow lotus petals. After taking a sip, Mo Tiange suddenly felt a stream of heat flowing from her abdomen to her limbs and bones. She felt extremely warm. It seemed that not only could she wash herself with snow lotus tea, but drinking snow lotus tea could also protect her from the cold wind of the northernmost area. Jiang Shanghang put down the teacup, looked at her, and continued with the previous topic. Junior Marshal Brother Yi. You said Junior Marshal Brother Qin is the disciple of a nascent soul cultivator at Xianqing School? Yes. There was nothing she couldn't say. So you're also at Xianqing School now? Mo Tiange smiled faintly and said, I was lucky. When I went to Xianqing School, I won Lord Taoist Jinghe's favor, and he accepted me as his registered disciple. After I built my foundation, I became his official disciple. Upon hearing this, Jiang Shanghang's gaze towards her was different from before. When he saw that Mo Tiange's cultivation level had already reached the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm, and she looked confident, he knew she was doing very well. However, he didn't know she was doing so well. An official disciple of a nascent soul cultivator. He thought about himself. After he built his foundation, his cultivation speed wasn't inferior to that of elite disciples, so he thought he was lucky enough. When he occasionally thought about Junior Marshal Brother Yi from back then, he always thought she was most likely no longer in this world. Even if she was lucky enough to escape the calamity, she probably wouldn't be able to build her foundation. Unexpectedly, not only did she build her foundation, but she was also doing so well that it was beyond his expectations. In that case, it's no wonder Junior Marshal Brother Yi made realm breakthroughs so fast. Not only did you smoothly build your foundation, but you also reached the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm so quickly. Jiang Shanghang said with a sigh. Everyone has their own fortune. There's no point in being envious. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, you're already an official disciple of Zhengfa sect now. Why do you need to be envious? With Senior Marshal Brother Jiang's temperament, presumably, you also have hope for the Great Tao. Jiang Shanghang smiled bitterly. The Great Tao? That's too far. Back then, I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I thought those two ancestors deliberately suppressed me, so that Jiang Chengxian could stand up for me. In fact, even if they didn't suppress me, so what? Maybe I could build my foundation very smoothly, but, after that, my future would be unpredictable. Mo Tiange was silent. If she hadn't obtained the art of the origin, and turned from a waste spiritual root of 5 elements, into a heaven-gifted genius in one fell swoop, her cultivation path would probably be the same. When she was in the aura refining realm, she always thought that by relying on her own efforts, even if the path to immortality was difficult, she could still reach the other side. However, after she built her foundation, she discovered that her previous thoughts were simply overestimating the immensity of heaven and earth. Aptitude, cultivation technique, temperament, and luck, not a single one could be lacking. At least Senior Marshal Brother Jiang built his foundation smoothly, didn't you? Jiang Shanghang sighed. I was able to build my foundation because I entered Zhengfa sect. Back then, although I obtained foundation refining pills and constitution enhancing pills, I tried them once and failed. Later, I went to the northernmost area and entered Zhengfa sect. I modified their high-grade ice element cultivation technique and won a minor competition in the sect. It was only after I obtained pointers from a core formation senior that I dared to enter closed-door meditation again. This time, I finally succeeded by a fluke. With Jiang Shanghang's aptitude of 4 spiritual roots, being able to build his foundation twice was indeed a fluke. In fact, wasn't she also lucky? Back then, when I built my foundation, I used no less than 4 foundation building pills. If I hadn't received several foundation building pills as a reward from Master, I don't know when I would have been able to build my foundation. Mo Tiange also sighed. She didn't know when she was in the aura refining realm, but after building her foundation, she recalled the process of building her foundation. The two of them sighed, then glanced at each other and couldn't help but smile. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then chose a tactful way of saying, Right, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. Your temperament seems to be different from before. Jiang Shanghang laughed. I know what you mean. You want to say that I'm not as annoying as before, right? Mo Tiange also smiled and didn't deny it. Jiang Shanghang said, It was only after I left the Jiang clan and saw more things that I realized the world was actually this big. When I was in the Jiang clan, in order to cultivate quickly, I kept using secret techniques, which damaged my body and caused my temperament to become very strange. When I arrived at Zhengfa sect, I gave up my original cultivation technique and switched to Zhengfa sect's high-grade ice element cultivation technique, so I was naturally different from before. I see. No wonder his temperament was different. His previous secret techniques tended to be cold and gloomy, while his current high-grade ice element cultivation technique tended to be cold. Moreover, without the shackles of Jiang clan, he was naturally more cheerful. Besides here, everyone in the tribe respects me, and Zhengfa sect also doesn't bully me. Everything goes smoothly, so I naturally won't be resentful of the world. Mo Tiange thought about it and agreed. The environment affected one's temperament. When she was in Yunwu sect, she was cautious and had a heavy heart. She always greeted people with a smile and didn't dare to offend them in the slightest. When she arrived at Xianqing school, she had a cultivation level, identity and status, so her personality became more flamboyant, and she also learned to show her power to others. Junior martial brother Ye's also different from before. Jiang Shanghang sized her up again, then said with a smile, "In the past, no matter how I looked at you, junior martial brother Yi was still a child, but now, you can really be considered a fairy." Was this a compliment to her appearance? Mo Tiange felt a bit strange. Even though she changed back to her female clothes, she always wore a loose Taoist robe with big sleeves, and she only wore her hair in a Taoist bun. She didn't even use the jewelry Qin she gave her. When she thought of this name, she was stunned. They hadn't seen each other for 10 years, so she didn't know how his closed-door meditation was going. Master said he was too thoughtful and most likely couldn't form his nascent soul, but he was very persistent. However, she clearly knew he wasn't an impatient person when it came to cultivation. So what made him so anxious to form his nascent soul? Junior martial brother Yi. Junior martial brother Yi. Seeing Jiang Shanghang's curious expression, Mo Tiange realized she was distracted just now. She felt annoyed and said, "I'm sorry, senior martial brother Jiang." Jiang Shanghang looked at her inquisitively, but in the end, he shook his head and didn't ask anything. Instead, he talked about another matter. "Right, you said junior martial brother Qin is Lord Taoist Jinghe's disciple. Are you his martial brother now?" "Yes. Since he's a disciple of a big sect like Xianqing School, and a nascent soul cultivator's disciple, why did he go to Yunwu sect? And he stayed there for 3 years. She also didn't know the reason. Besides, this was Qinshi's private matter, so it wasn't appropriate for her to say it. Seeing her embarrassed expression, Jiang Shanghang said, "I was just asking casually. If it's not convenient, you don't have to say it." Mo Tiange sighed with relief and explained with a smile, "This is senior martial brother Qin's private matter. It's not convenient for me to say it. I was too abrupt." Jiang Shanghang put down this question and asked again, "How is junior martial brother Qin now?" "Very good." She swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. "Senior martial brother Qin advanced even faster than me." "Really?" Jiang Shanghang was surprised. He thought for a moment and said, "Back then, he was only an aura refining disciple, but he was already the disciple of a nascent soul cultivator. Could it be that his aptitude is actually very outstanding?" As he spoke, he stared at Mo Tiange with a somewhat strange expression. What he was thinking was that he knew what aptitude this junior martial brother Yi had, but he was unexpectedly accepted as a disciple by a nascent soul cultivator. Could it be because of that junior martial brother Qin? "You can say that." Mo Tiange said faintly, "Senior martial brother Qin is my master's blood-related descendant, and his aptitude is outstanding. Presumably, it's not impossible for him to advance to the nascent soul realm." Nascent soul. Upon hearing this, Jiang Shanghang couldn't help but say, "Junior martial brother Qin is only in the foundation building realm now, right? He's a genius with a single spiritual root, but advancing to the nascent soul realm isn't a certainty." However, he only saw Mo Tiange smiling slightly as if she didn't care, so he swallowed the rest of his words and said, "Back then, There were 5 people in our family. Junior martial brother Su died. And you and junior martial brother Qin left. The only one left in Yunwu sect was senior martial brother Lu. I wonder how proud he is now. When Louis Dao was mentioned, Jiang Shanghang sneered, seemingly disdainful. Mo Tiange frowned slightly. She asked in confusion. Senior martial brother Jiang, back then, you and senior martial brother Lu didn't have any conflicts, right? Of course not. Then why did you? Jiang Shanghang sneered again. I originally thought among cultivators, he was one of those people who valued friendship. Who would have thought I'd see a secret of his? A secret? Mo Tiange was stunned. Correct. Jiang Shanghang said coldly. Do you know how junior martial brother Su died? It was during the foundation building pills test. Mo Tiange paused. Since Jiang Shanghang said that, could it be that Su Jingji's death was related to Louis Dao? Upon seeing her expression, Jiang Shanghang nodded indifferently. You should have guessed what I mean. Back then in that forest, I happened to see them. I saw them being besieged with my own eyes. When they were in danger, senior martial brother Lu, in order to buy himself time to escape, didn't warn junior martial brother Su, and took advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to him to slip away. However, junior martial brother Su was surrounded by Zixia sect's cultivators. Without a doubt he died. What? Mo Tiange's face paled. She was about to question why Jiang Shanghang didn't make a move even though he saw them. But on second thought, regardless of Jiang Shanghang's temperament back then, since he was bound to lose, he naturally wouldn't throw his life away. However, not making a move was one thing, and abandoning Su Jingji like a sacrificial pawn was another. The last time she saw Louis Dao, he was so angry about Su Jingji's death. Could it be that he had a guilty conscience? Because he did such a thing, he hated the person who made him do it even more. Mo Tiange said slowly, senior martial brother Lu is also in the foundation building realm now. I met him once. He's now a core formation cultivator's disciple of Yunwu sect. Really? Jiang Shanghang sneered with an indifferent expression. I've been away from Yunwu sect for so long, and I don't plan to go back in the future. Whatever happens to him has nothing to do with me. Mo Tiange was speechless. She also thought the same way. It was something that happened more than 10 years ago. So what if Louis Dao wronged Su Jingji? In any case, she wouldn't have anything to do with him in the future. However, this matter really made her sigh with emotion. Sure enough, one might know a person's face but not his heart. Chapter 173. Jiang Shanghang asked. Junior martial brother Yi, since you're a disciple of a famous school now, why did you come to such a difficult place like the northernmost area? Well, I won't hide it from senior martial brother Jiang. I left the mountain to travel. Zhengfa sect and Xianqing school are both Dao schools, so I came to the northernmost area to take a look. Her words were half true. There was nothing to hide about traveling, but it wasn't convenient to talk about fated chances like entering Ziwei's Immortal's cave. Jiang Shanghang naturally didn't know what she was concealing, so he just nodded. This was very normal. Before disciples of big cultivation groups made realm breakthroughs, most of them had to go out to gain experience to avoid failure when their mental state wasn't strong enough. Mo Tiange was now in the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm. So according to the rules, she had to go out to gain experience, so she could advance to the late stage of the foundation building realm. Where's senior martial brother Jiang? Why aren't you in Zhengfa sect? Jiang Shanghang smiled but didn't answer immediately. A hint of hesitation flashed in his eyes as he said slowly, I won't hide it from you. With my aptitude, it'll be very difficult for my cultivation to advance after building my foundation. So I'm not often in the school. I often go out to find spiritual plants to concoct medicinal pills. Otherwise, with my aptitude, it'll be very difficult. He paused then continued. This time, I left the school with this in mind. Don't be fooled by the boundless snowfield in this northernmost area. In fact, there are many good things there. It'll just depend on whether other people can find them or not. Looking at the mysterious smile on Jiang Shanghang's face, Mo Tiange couldn't help but ask, does senior martial brother Jiang know? Jiang Shanghang was still smiling. If Junior Marshal Brother Yi is interested, we can talk about it in detail later. Since Junior Marshal Brother Yi came to the northernmost area, I should do my best as a host and entertain you well. Seeing that Jiang Shanghang changed the topic, Mo Tiange knew he still wanted to talk about it, so she didn't ask. She nodded and said, "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. I'm unfamiliar with this northernmost area, so Senior Marshal Brother Jiang's hospitality couldn't be better." Jiang Shanghang laughed then said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you're also very tired. Why don't you take a rest first? After you've rested enough, we can discuss some cultivation matters, or we can show you the scenery of the northernmost area. Then, I'll have to trouble Senior Marshal Brother Jiang." Jiang Shanghang nodded with a smile then raised his voice and shouted, "Guards!" After a while, the woman who brought the tea lifted the curtain and entered the room. She bowed and said, "Immortal Master, what are your orders?" Jiang Shanghang said, "Clean up the guest room and properly entertain my friend." The woman glanced at Mo Tiange. "Yes." After that, he walked towards Mo Tiange, bowed respectfully, and made an inviting gesture. "Fairy, please come with me." Mo Tiange once again cupped her hands towards Jiang Shanghang then stood up and followed the woman out of the igloo. The mortal woman led her around a corner and entered an ice house not far away. This igloo was similar to the one Jiang Shanghang was in. It also had a small living room with a curtained door on the inside. It was not convenient to make doors in the ice houses in the extreme north. It seemed that the door curtains were made of animal skin. After bringing her here, the mortal woman respectfully bowed and said, "Fairy, please rest here. If you need anything, just shout for me." Mo Tiange sized up the small igloo. After bowing once more, the mortal woman retreated. Mo Tiange rubbed the space between her eyebrows. She felt very tired, but she still carefully laid a defensive formation inside the house before entering the virtual sky world. It only took her 3 or 4 days to discover spiritual aura fluctuations in Jin country, trace them to Jiuling Mountains Fengxi Valley, enter Ziwei's Immortal's Cave, and finally be transported to the northernmost glacier through the transporting formation. For a foundation-building cultivator, 3 or 4 days were nothing. However, after going through so many things, she already felt mentally exhausted. After entering the virtual sky world, she was finally safe. She didn't want to do anything, so she simply lay down and slept to her heart's content. When she woke up, she didn't know what time it was. Recalling her experience in Ziwei's Immortal's Cave, she took out the 2 stone sculpture puppets, the Xuanji formation book, and the sunstone from her Qianquan bag. In Ziwei's Immortal's Cave, she obtained a total of 5 things. The cloud-treading boots were already on her body. She didn't recognize the unknown ore, but it was certainly not an ordinary object, so she put it away first. The other 3 things were in front of her. These 2 stone sculpture puppets were both in the late stage of the foundation building realm. The control method Wanderer Ziwei left in her mind told her that these puppets could automatically absorb the spiritual aura around them. As long as there was spiritual aura, they could move forever. For the current her, having 2 late-stage foundation building cultivators as helpers increased her strength by more than half. If she controlled them well, she wouldn't need to fear cultivators below the core formation realm. There was also the sunstone. According to Taoist Fangzheng, this thing could produce sun-real fire and could be used to concoct medicinal pills. This time, for the sake of Xinji's safety, she left Xiaohua next to Xinji's body. Foundation-building cultivators didn't have enough Dantian real fire, so they just lacked a suitable concocting fire. The most important thing was still the Xuanji formation book. She witnessed the power of the illusory formation with her own eyes in Ziwei's Immortal's Cave. At that time, Wanderer Ziwei was lenient. If he wasn't lenient, how terrifying would that formation be? If that was the case, then it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that after learning this profound formation tome, she would be able to fight many enemies at once if she was prepared. Even if she were to face a high-grade cultivator, it wouldn't be as if she didn't have any life-saving measures. She immersed her divine sense into the jade slip. Just as she was about to start studying the Xuanji formation book, she heard a voice outside the virtual sky world. Fairy, fairy? Emotinga pressed the space between her eyebrows and exited the virtual sky world. She then opened the formation and said, "Come in." Someone lifted the curtain outside and entered, stopping outside the inner door. Then, the voice of the woman from yesterday could be heard. "Fairy, our immortal master has invited you. Would it be convenient for Fairy to meet him?" As it turned out, Jiang Shanghang wanted to see her. Emotinga nodded. "I understand. Let's go now." The woman bowed again and led her back to the igloo from yesterday. As soon as she lifted the curtain, Jiang Shanghang was already waiting for her in the living room. When he saw her coming in, he stood up and greeted her. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I didn't disturb you, did I?" Emotinga smiled and said, "No, I'm just idle and have nothing to do." Jiang Shanghang replied with a smile, "That's good. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, yesterday I said I'd take you to see the scenery of the northernmost area. Since the weather is fine today, how about we go out for a walk?" "Sure." Since the master invited her, what reason did she have to refuse? The two of them left the igloo. Under the worship of the mortals in the tribe, they used their respective flying magic tools and flew into the air. The mortals below looked at them with envy and respect. Emotinga even saw a mother holding her child who was only 3 or 4 years old and earnestly teaching him. "Xiaofeng, do you see that? This is Master Immortal. Master Immortal said you have spiritual roots. Although it's not very good, you can still cultivate. Cultivate well. And when you grow up, you'll be able to fly like Master Immortal." Jiang Shanghang presumably also heard what she said, so he smiled and said, "That child only has 5 spiritual roots, but in the end he can still cultivate. Everyone's hopes are on him." Emotinga was a bit surprised. "There are only several hundred people in this tribe, right? Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, you said you came to this tribe because their Master Immortal passed away, and now they have a child with spiritual roots. Why does it seem like the probability of them having spiritual roots is very high?" "Correct. I was also very surprised when I first came here," Jiang Shanghang said. "The probability of the mortals in the northernmost area having spiritual roots is much higher than in the heartland. It's almost not inferior to the cultivation clans in Kunwu. A tribe with several hundred people can have one person with spiritual roots. However, their spiritual roots are generally poor, and cultivators with 3 spiritual roots or more rarely appear. Furthermore, their cultivators' lifespans are also shorter than Kunwu people's." "Oh, I guess it might be because of the special environment in the northernmost area. They need the protection of cultivators, so gradually, they have more cultivators than Kunwu. However, since there are advantages, there are naturally disadvantages. The price is that their cultivators' lifespans are shorter than Kunwu's." This made sense. In the Middle Ages era, there was a popular theory, the survival of the fittest, that only the fittest could survive. Facts also proved this principle. Those who were passed on adapted to the changes in the environment, and those who couldn't adapt died. One day the weather was fine, just like Jiang Shanghang said. The sun appeared in the sky, giving them a bit of warmth when it shone on them. Under the sunlight, the glaciers reflected colorful light, dazzling and beautiful like a rainbow. Emotinga flew in the sky and looked down. She only saw a boundless sparkling glacier with rainbows hanging between them, which was really intoxicating. Jiang Shanghang turned around and saw her expression. He said with a smile, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi also thinks the scenery in the northernmost area is very beautiful?" Emotinga nodded and couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. "The world is so big, and each place has its own beauty. Kunwu mountain range is majestic, and this northernmost glacier with its boundless whiteness is also very spectacular." Yes, Jiang Shanghang looked proud. "Only after coming to the northernmost area did I realize how vast the world is. Why should I be restricted to one mountain or one person? Jiang clan doesn't treat me well, so I'll just leave. The world is so big, is there no place for me to go? In such a beautiful world, why should I be depressed because of Jiang clan that doesn't treat me well?" "You're right." Emotinga couldn't help but clap her hands and praise him. "Senior Marshal Brother Jiang is so broad-minded. If there's wine, you'll naturally drink it. Haha, Jiang Shanghang looked up and laughed. He took out a small bottle of wine from his robe and threw it to her. You want wine? Isn't this it? Mo Tiange caught it. When she saw him taking out another bottle from his robe and opening it, looking very heroic, she also couldn't help but feel heroic. She also pulled out the cork and clinked her bottle with his. To senior martial brother Jiang for being reborn and being different from the past. Jiang Shanghang smiled. To our escape, to our reunion after more than 10 years, to this vast world, and to our beautiful future. The two of them finished their wine in one gulp. Jiang Shanghang threw the bottle away and heaved a sigh of relief. After being in the northernmost area for more than 10 years, I don't want to go back to Kunwu. This place is peaceful and happy. Although there are occasional disputes and daily life is hard, it's better than Kunwu's unpredictable people who scheme every day. Is that so? Mo Tiange gazed into the distance. The boundless snowfield was empty, devoid of people, and only the cries of wild beasts could be heard. She also wanted this kind of peaceful and happy life. However, everything was good for her now in Xianqing school. She had a master, friends, and relatives. These things were more important to her. Chapter 174. After enjoying the scenery, Jiang Shanghang said, Junior Martial Brother Yi, do you know that this northernmost glacier is actually an ocean? Mo Tiange was surprised. An ocean? Yes. Jiang Shanghang pointed to the north. Over there, north of the glacier. Mo Tiange looked as far as she could but couldn't see anything. Jiang Shanghang leaped up and stepped on his flying magic tool. Let's go. Seeing that he was in high spirits, Mo Tiange also leaped up. Jiang Shanghang had already seen her flying in the air without using a flying magic tool, so he couldn't help but ask, Junior Martial Brother Yi, you can actually fly this fast? Mo Tiange smiled. Of course not. Senior Martial Brother Jiang, look at my boots. These are flying magic tools. Jiang Shanghang naturally noticed that the boots on her feet were full of spiritual aura, but he wasn't sure. Now that he heard her words, he took a second look at them, feeling quite envious. As a flying magic tool, boots were much more convenient than ordinary flying magic tools, and they also saved magic power. However, flying magic tools in the shape of boots were very rare. Since Mo Tiange said they were magic tools, Jiang Shanghang naturally felt envious. Although he was now a disciple of Zhengfa sect, and was respected, he didn't have a master, and was only an ordinary sect cultivator. He naturally didn't have any magic tools, but he had good magic tools. The two of them flew north. After flying for about half a day, they heard a rumbling sound. When they got closer, Mo Tiange saw a vast ocean between the huge glaciers. This is the ocean. Yes. Jiang Shanghang floated in the air, looking at the ocean in the distance. This is the northernmost ocean. It's so vast that I don't know where it leads to. There are demonic beasts everywhere. And there are countless rare treasures. It all depends on whether people have the ability to take them away. When Mo Tiange heard what he said, she turned her head and stared at him thoughtfully. Jiang Shanghang turned back and smiled. It seems Junior Martial Brother Yi understands what I mean. Yes, in order to cultivate, I always go deep into the northernmost ocean to look for spiritual objects to exchange for cultivation needs. I told Junior Martial Brother Yi about this, because I wanted to ask if you were interested. Mo Tiange didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned around and looked at the boundless ocean in front of her. In the northernmost area, whether it was the boundless snowfield or the ocean in front of her, it was so vast and peaceful that people couldn't help but feel open-minded. She couldn't bear to let the matters of the cultivation world taint it. Senior Brother Jiang, are there any treasures here? What's the price? Upon hearing what she said, Jiang Shanghang seemed to heave a sigh of relief. He pointed at a place in the distance and said, Junior Martial Brother Yi, do you see that sharp horn? Mo Tiange looked in the direction he was pointing. It was an iceberg about 1,000 feet tall. It looked like a sharp knife tearing a corner of the sea apart. Jiang Shanghang said, that iceberg has a name among the disciples of Zhengfa sect. How should I address you? Correct, that isn't an ordinary iceberg. It hasn't melted in 10,000 years, nor has it drifted away, firmly standing here. We call it the land of the hidden dragon. The land of hiding dragon. Emotienga repeated with a puzzled expression. Dragons were the most powerful of the ancient divine beasts. The dragon clan was born with divine abilities, and they were once the race closest to gods. They could move clouds and summon rain, and they could swallow rivers and spit out oceans. Even a newborn dragon child had the same ability as a core formation cultivator. At the end of their cultivation, they would become winged dragons. They could fly in the sky, dive into the earth, and roam the universe. They were also the most carefree race. Senior Martial Brother Jiang, are you trying to say that dragons really exist? Jiang Shanghang shook his head. We don't know whether dragons really exist or not. However, this land of the hidden dragon has been passed down among Zhengfa sect disciples for thousands of years. I've also seen it. There's indeed a mysterious spiritual breath inside, but no one knows whether it's a dragon or not. Is it dangerous inside? Of course. Danger and opportunity coexist. A fervent glint flashed in Jiang Shanghang's eyes. He said in a low voice, we once had a senior who obtained a mysterious treasure inside and entered the core formation realm in one go. But among the disciples who entered, some came out with serious injuries and some died. Seeing that Emotienga didn't say anything, he anxiously asked, Junior Martial Brother Yi, are you not interested? Emotienga smiled faintly and cast him a glance. Senior Martial Brother Jiang, what happened to your magnanimity just now? Jiang Shanghang was startled. A blushing expression appeared on his face, but he still said resolutely, I'm no longer trapped by my past. I can embark on the path of cultivation, so how can I give up? If I can go further, I naturally won't give up the opportunity to become an immortal. Emotienga was silent. The great path to immortality was just these 4 words. How many magnanimous people couldn't see through it, let alone Jiang Shanghang? She took a deep breath and said, Senior Martial Brother Jiang, if there aren't enough benefits, I don't need to risk my life. What do you think? Jiang Shanghang was startled, but when he recalled her current identity, he finally reacted. He still smiled and said, This land of hiding dragon isn't the only place where ordinary disciples like us go to look for treasures. Even the elite disciples in the school also flock like ducks. Junior Martial Brother Yi, do you think there aren't enough benefits inside? Is that so? Zhengfa sect was also one of the 7 great cultivation groups in the Celestial Pole. Its power was only slightly smaller than Xianqing School and Gujian sect. So that meant, seeing that Emotienga didn't seem very interested, Jiang Shanghang said, Junior Martial Brother Yi, don't underestimate the treasures inside. In Zhengfa sect, even nascent soul cultivators often go to the land of hiding dragon. Unless you're a disciple in the foundation building realm or above, you can't invite disciples who aren't from our school to enter. Oh. His words piqued Emotienga's interest. Nascent soul cultivators wouldn't be interested in ordinary treasures at all. Treasures that could make them frequently go there to look for treasures had to be natural treasures. Seeing that Emotienga finally looked a little interested, Jiang Shanghang hastily said, Junior Martial Brother Yi, if it was someone else, I wouldn't want to tell you, but you're my old friend. You're a reliable person, and your strength isn't bad, so I felt at ease to ask you to be my companion. You don't need to worry too much, and it won't be dangerous to the point of death. Ever since I built my foundation, I've been there many times, and I always came back safely. As long as I'm careful and well prepared, my life usually won't be in danger. Is that so? Emotienga was slightly moved by what he said. That being the case, why did Senior Martial Brother Jiang insist on inviting me? Wouldn't it be better if we went together? Jiang Shanghang smiled bitterly and shook his head. I won't hide this from you. I'm just an ordinary foundation-building cultivator in Zhengfa sect. I don't have a close relationship with my fellow disciples, so I'll always be in a disadvantageous position if we enter the land of hiding dragon together. The few people I have a good relationship with are all mediocre. If Junior Martial Brother Yi goes with me, with your help, I'll be able to have a say. So that's how it is. Emotienga mulled it over in her heart. What he said seemed to be true. Among big cultivation groups, There were also small groups, and Xianqing School was no exception. Then, when do you plan to go, senior martial brother Jiang? Upon hearing Imotianga's tone, and knowing that she didn't refuse, Jiang Shanghang was delighted. He said, I returned to the tribe this time to prepare for my trip to the land of Hiding Dragon. I've already made an appointment with my fellow disciples, so there's about 10 days left. Imotianga nodded. Senior martial brother Jiang, please tell me what I need to pay attention to. In fact, it's nothing, Jiang Shanghang said. Presumably, junior martial brother Yi has prepared medicinal pills, magic tools, and so on. There's only one thing. Entering the land of Hiding Dragon requires some secret medicines. Junior martial brother doesn't need to worry about this. I'll prepare your share. All right. Imotianga formally agreed. That being the case, I'll go with senior martial brother Jiang. Jiang Shanghang beamed with joy. Junior martial brother Yi, I'll remember your kindness this time. Imotianga waved her hand. If it's also beneficial to me, it's nothing. Once the two of them finished talking, Imotianga observed the surrounding scenery for a while before heading back with Jiang Shanghang. On the way, Jiang Shanghang gave her a brief introduction to the land of Hiding Dragon. As it turned out, the shamans of the northernmost lands already knew about the land of Hiding Dragon before Jingfa sect arrived. Every year on the 15th day of the 8th month, they would gather there to offer sacrifices. Occasionally, some people obtained fated chances there and advanced to the foundation-building realm. But at that time, the land of Hiding Dragon didn't have this name yet. After Zhengfa sect was established, they learned about the land of Hiding Dragon and sent a nascent Soul Dao ancestor to explore it. In the end, they returned after a thrilling adventure, and the land of Hiding Dragon's name was passed down. The strange thing was that after several thousand years, countless Zhengfa sect disciples entered the land of Hiding Dragon and obtained a lot of treasures from there. But the number of treasures never decreased. Imotianga couldn't help but ask, Senior martial brother Jiang, how's that possible? Jiang Shanghang answered. Yes, that's what I thought in the beginning. But ever since I built my foundation, every time I entered the land of Hiding Dragon, I found that it was completely different from the last time. Completely different? Imotianga was puzzled. What kind of scenery is it inside? Yes, it's completely different. Jiang Shanghang said. The land of Hiding Dragon is located underwater, so it's a world in the sea. But every time we went inside, we found that the terrain was completely different from the last time. Even the demonic beasts and resources were completely different. Are there any traces of formations inside? Jiang Shanghang smiled bitterly and shook his head. I can't see it. Even our nascent soul grandmasters can't see it. Imotianga looked pensive. So you're saying it's an existence that surpasses our current realm? Yes. Jiang Shanghang nodded. Every year on the 15th day of the 8th month, the tide rises. After that, the scenery inside will completely change. We can't stay inside when the tide rises. Of course. It's said that there were people who couldn't come out when the tide rose. After a day passed, they couldn't be found anymore. But, Jiang Shanghang paused for a moment and said with some hesitation, I once heard from a senior martial brother that the second layer of the land of Hiding Dragon changes every few years. The second layer? Imotianga frowned. Are there several layers inside? Correct. There are 3 layers inside. The first layer can be entered by U.S. foundation building and aura refining disciples, but the second and third layers can only be entered by cultivators in the core formation realm and above. Has this been a rule of your Zhengfa sect for several thousand years? Yes. Jiang Shanghang didn't hide anything. This was a rule set by the founder of our sect. Someone once violated it, and as a result several foundation-building cultivators entered the second layer and never came back. Imotianga was stunned. It's actually that serious? She pondered for a moment then asked. Then what's in the second layer? Did the core formation seniors in your sect say anything? No. Jiang Shanghang shook his head and advised her. Junior martial brother Yi, our lives are more important. We'll just go to the first layer. If we're lucky on the first layer, we can also obtain natural treasures, so there's really no need to take risks on the second layer. Chapter 175. After returning to the Seal tribe and parting ways with Jiang Shanghang, Emotienga set up a defensive formation and entered the virtual sky world. In fact, she didn't really believe what Jiang Shanghang said. It wasn't very dangerous, but there were a lot of unique treasures. Such a good thing would definitely be considered a complete secret by the people in their sect. Not to mention inviting disciples from other sects. Even disciples from their own sect wouldn't know about it. But she didn't think Jiang Shanghang had any bad intentions. Back in Yunwu's sect, she only saved him once in passing, yet he was willing to take the risk to save her. Moreover, he really despised Lui Dao's method of abandoning Su Jingji. Presumably, although he was a selfish person, he wasn't a sinister person. If he didn't have good intentions for her, he wouldn't have acted like this. In short, Jiang Shanghang's character wasn't bad. He also saved her life once, which was the main reason why she agreed to go with him. Speaking of unique treasures and benefits, she didn't really desire them now. She already had too many things, so she really didn't need to be so greedy. With that thought in mind, Emotienga began to make preparations for the trip. Although Jiang Shanghang said she didn't need to prepare anything, Emotienga's personality was like this. She always planned before taking action. This way, there would be fewer accidents, and she would have a higher chance of survival in a dangerous environment. She took out 2 stone sculpture puppets from her Qianquan bag. With a single thought, the 2 puppets started to get busy. In the center of her virtual sky world, there were several small huts. Outside the huts was a dense bamboo forest. Surrounding the bamboo forest was a small stream, and on the other side of the stream was a large expanse of medicinal fields. After she recognized this virtual sky world as its master, although it went through some preliminary cleaning, the layout didn't change. It was still arranged by its previous master. Now that she summoned the 2 stone sculpture puppets, they quickly cleared the bamboo forest in front of the huts, leaving only half of the forest in the back. Then, she used the chopped bamboos to build several huts in the open space. When the stone sculpture puppets finished building all the huts, Emotienga walked towards the largest one. She opened her hand, causing several formation discs to fly out and be placed in the corresponding positions. She made extremely complicated hand seals and shot spiritual aura, causing all the formation discs to light up. Then, she threw the last formation flag, and the whole formation was activated. She then put her hand into her Qianquan bag, took out a pill furnace, and put it in the center. This pill furnace was about 2 feet square, covered in dense purple aura, and shrouded in spiritual light. It was the purple wooden furnace Zhong Muling gave her. After taking out the purple wooden furnace and confirming there were no problems, Emotienga once again, she gave her divine comprehension. She ordered the 2 stone sculpture puppets to use. While the puppets were busy, Emotienga wasn't idle either. She reached into her robe and fished out something. It was none other than the Sunstone Wanderer Ziwei gave her. She took out the Dragon of the World bag, and Zhong with the Zhong with the cultivator, and in the purple cave, Zhong had with Emo Chun Dao, and Ling with Zhong with the puppets. Emo Zhong with she didn't with she. With she, with Emo with Emo with she. Emo with Yang. Holding the sunlight stone in her palm, she took out a talisman brush from her robe with her other hand. Soon after, she used her divine comprehension to force out a drop of blood essence. She dipped the talisman brush in the blood essence, and quickly drew lines around the purple wooden furnace. These lines seemed unreasonable, but once they were drawn on the purple wooden furnace, they shone brightly as if they were real. After she finished drawing, Emotienga put away the brush, opened the purple wooden furnace, and put the sunlight stone inside. She then made a series of complicated hand seals, and sealed the sunlight stone at the bottom of the furnace. Once she was done, she felt a wave of tiredness. Blood essence was a person's foundation. Every drop was extremely precious. Even though she was a foundation-building cultivator, losing 1 drop still made her tired. She sat down cross-legged, took several medicinal pills, and circulated her spiritual aura in her body several times before she finally felt a bit better. At that moment, the 2 stone sculpture puppets had finished arranging the concocting room. The water from the brook was drawn into the small room through a bamboo pipe, dripping into the small pond. She put away the stone sculpture puppets, pondered for a moment, and decided on the type of medicinal pills she would concoct this time. Healing medicinal pills were necessary, but detoxification and mind-calming medicinal pills were also indispensable. Last time in Ziwei's Immortal's Cave, fortunately, Taoist Fangjing brought several mind-calming talismans with him. Otherwise, she would have had to spend a lot of effort. By the time she finished concocting all these medicinal pills, several days had already passed. During this time, she specifically told the maids sent to serve her that she wanted to cultivate clear-headed for several days, and not to disturb her if there was nothing important. After that, she prepared some tools that could be used to lay formations temporarily. Time was tight, so she didn't have time to study the Xuanji formation book. However, her attainments in formations had always surpassed cultivators of the same generation, so she was able to lay several sets of formations very quickly, including the 4 symbols 100 flowers formation. If she could finish laying this compound formation, even if she encountered a demonic beast in the 5th rank or above, she wouldn't be completely powerless. In the last few days, Mo Tiange did nothing but closed her eyes, meditated, and adjusted her breath, making her body and mind reach their best state. 10 days later, she came out of the virtual sky world, removed the formation she laid in the igloo, and walked out of the igloo. Jiang Shanghang was already waiting outside. When he saw her coming out, he smiled. Junior Marshal Brother, you really kept his word. 10 days is 10 days. Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. Since I promised Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, how could I go back on my word? At that moment, the two of them suddenly looked up and saw several flight lights flitting across the sky, eventually disappearing in the north. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, Jiang Shanghang said. It seems they've already gone. Let's go too. The they Jiang Shanghang mentioned were the fellow disciples he'd made an appointment with. Mo Tiange nodded. The two of them immediately used their respective methods, turning into 2 flight lights and swiftly flying away. After flying for about half a day, the two of them once again arrived at the Arctic Sea they went to that day. In the distance, Mo Tiange saw several foundation-building cultivators hovering in the air above the seaside. There were both men and women, and based on their clothes, they were Zhengfa sect disciples. Jiang Shanghang immediately led Mo Tiange over. Senior Marshal Brothers and Sisters, I'm late. Please forgive me. Jiang Shanghang raised his hand to greet everyone with a smile. Mo Tiange saw that his current behavior and way of doing things were indeed completely different from before. These Zhengfa sect disciples also saluted him back, but there was one person who didn't move. It seemed he was too arrogant to return the salute. Jiang Shanghang naturally also saw it, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he turned to introduce Mo Tiange to his fellow disciples. This is Junior Marshal Sister Yi Xiaotian from Xianqing School. She's also an old friend of mine. Junior Marshal Sister Ye's cultivation level is outstanding, so I specially invited her. Mo Tiange, who deliberately wore Xianqing School's Taoist robes today, cupped her hands towards them in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. I'm Yi Xiaotian. Greetings to fellow Taoists from Zhengfa sect. Upon hearing Jiang Shanghang's introduction, the Zhengfa sect cultivators' gazes fell on Mo Tiange. Amazement flitted across the male cultivators' eyes, but the 2 female cultivators' gazes were vigilant. Nevertheless, all of them returned the salute. Xianqing School was very powerful now. Compared to Tiandao sect, the number 1 cultivation group in the celestial pole, it even seemed to surpass them. Even though Zhengfa sect was located in the northernmost area, they still didn't dare to neglect them. Even the most arrogant male cultivator also stared at Mo Tiange and raised his hand to return the salute. Senior Marshal Brothers and Senior Marshal Sisters. Jiang Shanghang smiled and said, I acted on my own initiative and invited Junior Marshal Sister Yi here. You won't take offense, right? Everyone remained silent and shifted their gazes towards the arrogant male cultivator. That male cultivator was looking at Mo Tiange. Upon hearing Jiang Shanghang's words, he shifted his gaze towards Mo Tiange, but immediately withdrew it. Since you're a junior martial sister from Xianqing School, let's come together. Jiang Shanghang finally heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that person relenting. He raised his hand and said, "Thank you, senior martial brother Ren." That person still didn't respond, and just stood there motionlessly. Jiang Shanghang didn't mind. He turned towards Mo Tiange and said, "Junior martial sister Yi, come, let me introduce you." Calling her junior martial brother Yi in front of outsiders was really strange, so he changed the way he addressed her. Among the 6 men and 2 women in front of them, the arrogant male cultivator, with the highest cultivation level, was in the late stage of the foundation building realm. The other 2 male cultivators were in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, while the rest, including Jiang Shanghang, were all in the early stage of the foundation building realm. Jiang Shanghang introduced them one by one. "This is senior martial brother Lu Rongsheng, senior martial brother Xiang Jiang, senior martial brother Qiu Jiming, junior martial brother Tang Fong, and junior martial brother Yu Xiaoran." He then moved on to the 2 female cultivators. "This is senior martial sister Ai Xian, senior martial sister Xia." Mo Tiange once again saluted them. Among these people, Lu Rongxing and Xiang Jiang were in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, while the others were in the early stage. The male cultivators were obviously more enthusiastic towards her, but the 2 female cultivators were lukewarm, which made Mo Tiange feel a bit strange. Finally, it was the arrogant male cultivator with the highest cultivation level. Jiang Shanghang put him last, but it was unclear whether he was being cautious or for some other reason. "This is senior martial brother Ren Yufeng, our leader this time. Senior martial brother Ren is our martial uncle Buki's inner disciple. Not only is his cultivation level high, but his skills are also outstanding." Although Jiang Shanghang said that, his tone was indifferent. "Greetings, senior martial brother Ren." Mo Tiange clasped her hands. Since she called Jiang Shanghang senior martial brother, she naturally had to call him senior martial brother. Between friends, they usually called each other senior martial brother or junior martial brother. Ren Yufeng returned the salute, then finally said, "Junior martial sister Yi, you're really young and promising. From what I see, you shouldn't be more than 80 years old, right?" Mo Tiange smiled but didn't deny it. She maintained her appearance as if she was 20 years old. Based on the lifespan of foundation building cultivators, if she was 80 years old or younger, she would have her normal appearance instead of the effects of a look-preserving pill. Although look-preserving pills could keep one's appearance unchanged, experienced cultivators would most likely be able to see some clues. Probably because people were getting older, some of their behaviors and actions would naturally be different. "Senior martial brother Ren is too polite. I was just lucky." "Lucky?" Ren Yufeng chuckled, then said meaningfully, "If you could make a realm breakthrough just because you were lucky, wouldn't the world be full of high-level cultivators?" His words were a bit strange, so Mo Tiange just smiled and didn't say anything. Ren Yufeng swept his gaze over everyone, then said, "Good people, everyone's here. We can set out now." No one had any objections. A group of 10 people rode on their flying magic tools, then flew towards that huge iceberg together. Mo Tiange and Jiang Shanghang were at the very back. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then sent Jiang Shanghang a secret message. "Senior martial brother Jiang, why are their attitudes so strange? It seems like your senior martial sisters don't really welcome me." A strange smile appeared on Jiang Shanghang's face. He also sent her a secret message. "Junior martial brother Yi, you've probably been disguised as a man for too long that you've forgotten you're a woman, right? It's perfectly normal for my 2 senior martial sisters to dislike you. Women simply can't bear to see other people prettier than them." Chapter 176. Jiang Shanghang's answer stunned Mo Tiange. "This," Jiang Shanghang smiled. "Junior martial brother Yi, you've been in Kunwu for a long time, and have seen many beautiful women in the cultivation world, so you don't think much of yourself. But this is the northernmost area. Haven't you noticed that these 2 senior martial sisters look ordinary?" Upon hearing that, Mo Tiange looked towards the front. Ai Xian and Xiahou Yuan were indeed too ordinary in terms of their statuses as cultivators. There are very few beautiful women in the northernmost area. I wasn't used to it when I first came here, so I didn't think much of you before. Now that we meet again, I realize I missed a beauty, Jiang Shanghang said jokingly. Mo Tiange really wasn't used to this kind of joke, so she said helplessly, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, don't tease me. I'm thin-skinned. Hee. Seeing that she really looked uncomfortable, Jiang Shanghang stopped talking. I'm sorry, Junior Marshal Brother Yi. I shouldn't have made such a frivolous joke with you. Mo Tiange shook her head. It's just that I'm not used to it. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. You don't have to worry about it. Jiang Shanghang thought for a moment then comforted her. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, you don't have to worry. These Senior Marshal brothers are just a bit curious about you, because they're used to seeing female disciples from our school. Besides, even if those two Senior Marshal sisters don't like you, you're a Xianqing school disciple after all, so they won't do anything to you. I know. Cultivators were always wise. Besides, she wasn't a peerless beauty who could make people crazy with jealousy. However, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the current situation. As it turned out, one's appearance had to be set off. When she was in Kunwu, Bai Yinfei was the only one who showed goodwill to her. And that was because she was suitable for him. It wasn't until she arrived in the northernmost area that she realized she could also be considered a beauty. She looked at her temporary teammates again. Lu Xiang and Jiang Shanghang were slightly older. They seemed to be in their 40s, while the others looked like they were in their 20s or 30s. They were, after all, cultivators from cultivation groups, so they were much younger than individual cultivators. However, their appearances were indeed quite average. They weren't as good-looking as the cultivators in Kunwu. Mo Tiange swept her gaze over Jiang Shanghang. She couldn't help but feel the urge to make a joke. Compared to these people, Jiang Shanghang was also a lot more handsome. The group of 10 flew for a long time, but the iceberg was still in sight. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows then asked Jiang Shanghang, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, it doesn't seem that far. Jiang Shanghang explained, Junior Marshal Brother Yi, there's something you don't know, but in our northernmost area, there are glaciers everywhere. It's an expanse of white, so if you look at it, you'll have an illusion. The land of Hiding Dragon is actually thousands of miles away. So that's how it is. To a foundation establishment cultivator, several thousand li would indeed take a long time to fly. After flying for a while, the iceberg finally came closer. It wasn't until she saw it that she realized the magnificence of this iceberg wasn't inferior to the other mountains in Kunwu. The majesty of Kunwu lay in its vast mountains that stretched for over 10,000 li. Each mountain was connected to another, and the scenery was different from each other. Some were steep and marvelous, some were graceful and calm. However, the iceberg in front of them just stood there by itself. The several thousand feet tall ice peak was lonely and silent, as if it had been overlooking the northernmost ocean ever since time immemorial. It watched the surrounding icebergs drift and the sea turn into mulberry fields while it stood there alone forever. This was a kind of solitary and proud beauty. Jiang Shanghang looked up and said, According to the legends of the northernmost people, this iceberg was here from the beginning. Other icebergs melted, disappeared, or drifted away, but it was the only one that remained like this since ancient times. Why didn't it melt? Mo Tiange couldn't help but ask. Under the sunlight, every ice peak was sparkling and translucent, looking magnificent and magnificent. I don't know. This time, the one who answered was Ren Yufeng. His cultivation level was the highest among them, and he was also their leader, so he was currently standing at the forefront. The land of Hiding Dragon is like this. Even nascent soul grandmasters can't answer these questions. Maybe we'll have to wait until we become deification cultivators before we can answer some of them. Ren Yufeng's gaze swept over them. Junior Marshal brothers and sisters, are you ready? If you're ready, we'll go in now. Mo Tiange looked at Jiang Shanghang. Before this trip, Jiang Shanghang said she needed some special things, but he'd prepare them for her. At that moment, Jiang Shanghang took out a palm-sized pouch and handed it to Mo Tiange. Junior, Marshal Sister Yi, these are bubble fruits. After eating one, A water-repelling barrier will form around your body that can last for a day. There are several dozens of them here, so they should be enough. Bubble fruit? What a childish name. Emotinga took the pouch and imitated them. She took out a plum-like fruit, took a bite and swallowed it. And the taste wasn't bad, it was a bit sweet. Jiang Shanghang also ate one, then moved closer to her and said, "This fruit is unique to the northernmost land. It's often used to coax children." While they were speechless, Ren Yufeng let everyone to dive into the water. Emotinga saw that they didn't use a defensive barrier, but after they went into the water, a water-repelling barrier automatically formed around their bodies. This bubble fruit really lived up to its name. After diving several hundred feet into the water, everyone finally stopped. Ren Yufeng took out a jade talisman, then muttered some unknown incantation. Several streams of spiritual aura hit the surface of the ice, causing ripples on the surface of the ice to ripple. A black hole slowly appeared on the surface of the ice, which was flat and flawless a moment ago. This was an extremely brilliant restriction, but even with Emotinga's attainments and formations, she couldn't see any clues. Apparently, the nascent soul grandmasters of Zhengfa sect also attached great importance to this place. But this made Emotinga even more puzzled. Since this was Zhengfa sect's important place, why did they invite her, a disciple from another cultivation group, to come? Jiang Shanghang trusted her, so why didn't the others have any objections? Without much time to think, Ren Yufeng already turned around. Under the water, his voice sounded a bit distorted. "Junior martial brothers and sisters, we're going in now. Be careful." Everyone cupped their hands and responded with solemn expressions on their faces. At that moment, Emotinga actually wanted to laugh. This was her first time seeing such a scene. There were so many foundation-building cultivators, and every one of them was talking with a bubble above their head. It was really interesting. Under Ren Yufeng's lead, the 10 of them slowly passed through the black hole. Emotinga followed behind them. Jiang Shanghang deliberately asked her to swim in front of him. Once they passed through the hole, the scenery in front of them changed, and they instantly felt warm all over. There was only ice and water under the northernmost sea, but inside this iceberg, there was actually a vast expanse of blue ocean. Inside the ocean, there were lush aquatic plants and shoals of fish. The water refracted specks of light. It was completely a scene of a warm ocean. Emotinga looked up. She even felt that the surface of the water and the sunlight weren't far from her. A shoal of finger-sized silver fish swam over. Under the refraction of water and light, their silvery white scales shone with silvery light, looking extremely wonderful. She was somewhat fascinated by this kind of scenery. She even wanted to reach out and stroke these silver fish. But behind her, Jiang Shanghang's expression suddenly changed. A sword appeared in his hand, and he slashed it towards the shoal of fish. Emotinga was startled. When she turned around to look, she discovered that everyone else also had the same expression, and each of them had taken out their magic tools. No matter how stupid she was, she should have realized there was something wrong with these silver fish. She immediately took out the shuttle of flying Apsara, causing a golden ray to scatter. However, since she was underwater, her strength was somewhat lacking, so she was obviously a lot slower. Once she realized this problem, Emotinga pondered inwardly. These Zhengfa sect disciples came here all year round, so their attacks weren't hindered in the slightest. She, on the other hand, was hindered by the water, so her strength was reduced. This was very disadvantageous to her. With the 10 foundation-building cultivators taking action, this shoal of small fish was quickly wiped out. While everyone was cleaning up the scene, Emotinga asked Jiang Shanghang in a low voice, "Senior martial brother Jiang, these small fish only have a little bit of spiritual aura. They're basically not demonic beasts, so why are they?" Jiang Shanghang put away his sword and said, "Junior martial sister Yi, these fish indeed aren't demonic beasts, but they have strange teeth. If we're touched by them, they'll bite us. They can even bite through our protective barriers." Emotinga was shocked. She'd never heard of anything that wasn't a demonic beast being able to harm cultivators. Sure enough, the world was big. Nothing was too strange. Then, The seemingly harmless water plants actually stretched out their tentacles, trying to entangle them. There were even huge mouths in the bushes that wanted to swallow them whole. It had only been 2 hours since they entered the interior of this iceberg, but they'd already encountered several fierce battles in succession. Only then did Emotienga understand what Jiang Shanghang meant. When facing these strange creatures, they had to be vigilant at all times. Things that seemed harmless might actually kill them. Therefore, danger lurked everywhere here. There were many small things that you might not notice, but they were actually dangerous things. However, if you were vigilant all the time, killing these seemingly harmless things wasn't difficult at all. By the time they finished killing a group of transparent jellyfish, they'd already arrived at a huge coral reef. The coral had a bright red luster. Emotienga could see that these corals were full of spiritual aura, so they could be considered treasures. At this moment, the leader, Ren Yufeng, stopped. He turned around and said, "Junior martial brothers and sisters, these red flame corals are hard to come by, so we can pick as many as we want. However, there might be some dangerous little things hidden among them, so you must be careful." Everyone nodded and agreed. Soon afterward, they scattered in all directions, looking for a piece that caught their fancy. Jiang Shanghang also pulled Emotienga to a spot and said, "Junior martial sister Yi, these red flame corals are at least 1,000 years old. Let's pick some of them and take them back. Even if we don't get anything else later, this trip won't be in vain." Corals were only used in a few special pill recipes. They had never been used in tool refining, so they weren't very valuable. Nevertheless, they were still spiritual objects that were 1,000 years old and rarely circulated in the world. If they kept some of them, they might be able to use them in the future. Jiang Shanghang had already taken out his flying sword and was carefully cutting a clump of coral. Emotienga imitated him. She also took out her own small flying sword and carefully cut a piece of coral. After confirming there was no danger, she finally put it into her Qiankuan bag. After collecting several pieces, Emotienga finally stopped. She wasn't greedy. Ren Yufeng said there might be danger in these coral clumps, so taking these risks for things that weren't too precious wasn't worth it. After a while, Ren Yufeng also spoke. "That'll do. Everyone stop. Don't pick too many. It won't be worth it if there's danger." Once he spoke, all the Zhengfa sect cultivators obediently stopped, collected their harvests, and moved closer to him. Everyone gathered together, but Ren Yufeng didn't seem to have any intention of moving forward. Instead, he swept his gaze over everyone with a very solemn expression. In the end, his gaze fell on Emotienga, but he said to Jiang Shanghang, "Junior martial brother Jiang, have you told junior martial sister Yi about the purpose of this trip? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."